Good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting. Welcome to the September 19th, 2024 meeting of the Seattle Trust Commission. Our meetings are recorded on MS Teams, as well as a link is provided for people who want to access the meeting. From 9:30 to 12:30 today, we are going to be receiving our final presentation from the team with the Downtown Seattle Association and Ike. The lead presenter today will be Mark Brand's site workshop. There will be a question, hopefully, and there may be about a vote, and there may be a vote on an aspect of the program today. Why don't we go ahead and start with introductions of commissioners and then of the presentation team. And commissioners, when you introduce yourself, if you could also tell your position on the commission, and when you, as part of your introduction, if there's any disclosures that you need to make, do that if you want. And we'll start with Brian.
Good morning, all. Brian Markham. I'm the Engineering Commission.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Clark. I'm the Art Commissioner.
Good morning, Adam Amrine, Urban Planning.
Good morning, Zubin Rao, Architecture.
Morning, everyone. My name is Caitlin Trong, and I'm the Get Engaged Commissioner.
Good morning, Molly Stefanik, and I'm the Urban Design Commissioner.
Good morning, I'm Kevin O'Neill. I'm the Transportation Planning Commissioner and Vice Chair, and I would disclose that I worked at SDOT for a number of years, and while at SDOT, I worked on a previous version of the same type of program that at that time was sponsored by the city. It was not this program with this applicant.
Morning, Phoebe Bogert, Commissioner.
Ben Gist, Architect Commissioner.
Mark.
Mark Brand, Landscape Architect Site Workshop, representing the Ike team.
We have a number of people in the audience today. I know that we'll also have people online. Beverly, did you want to start with introductions? We'll have everyone.
Beverly Barnett, Seattle Department of Transportation. Here at Seattle Department of Transportation. Karen Parchin and Valier, and with the names on. Maria Holsby, also in Waterfront and Civic Projects. Emily Burns, Office of the Waterfront and Civic Project.
Ryan Packer with the Urbanist.
Robert Smith, Kano Gates.
Tom Bender, I'm the local designer.
Gail Gatlin, Smart City.
Marty Hebron, Transportation Traffic Consultant to the IT team.
So in terms of meeting format, we'll follow our general format today, which there will be a presentation by the commission, by the applicant. After the presentation, we reserved up to 30 minutes for public comment. We wanted to make sure that we offered a little bit more time in case there were a lot of people who wanted to make comments. Since and over the course of our review, there have been about, I think, 30 comments in writing that have been provided to the commission and have been provided to commissioners, both in support of and concerns about the project. And so we wanted to have additional time in case there was a significant amount of public comment today. After which there will be an opportunity for commission questions, and then there will be discussion and, if possible, vote. That's all I have, Kevin. Do you have any number of concerns? Just for the sake of the record, you might play and Jessica, you might have.
Sure. Clay Collette, Ike Smart City.
Thanks.
Jessica Bergen, Ike Smart City.
John Scholes with the Downtown Seattle Association.
Thanks, John. All right.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my screen share here. Okay. Ready?
Yep.
Thank you. Little mood lighting. Okay, so thank you for this third and final meeting, and appreciate everyone's participation and comments to this point. We've got 6 topics here that we're going to cover. Just briefly go over the previous meeting that we had. That was meeting number 2. We'll catch you up on public engagement that is current and ongoing. Talk about device functions. There were a number of comments last time, so we'll make sure that we are really clear on the functions of the device. There have been a number of public comments that have come in as well, so we hope to actually answer those in line. We'll do a little bit of a deep dive into the CBER reports. They very much feed into this conversation, especially aesthetics. Marnie Heffron's here, and Marnie can answer questions during the Q&A period as well, relative to her attachment to the CEPA document. A few clarifying points on the permit, the term permit that were questions out of meeting number 2, and then I'll go through the end on the public benefit package. And as Michael's probably briefed you, we have really deliberately put these into 4 buckets for you. Schedule-wise, orange, we are at the 3rd meeting today. The remainder of the schedule really, if I actually go all the way to the end, it's all about World Cup, FIFA 2026. And so how do we get there? So there's the urgency. And so to move this through legislation later this year into next year to enable us to start the permitting process into Q1, Q2, Q3, 2025. Lots of work to do there. I'm not going to go through this. These are notes from the last meeting. The 2 top ones are the overarching concerns. Is the public benefit mitigation enough within position of advertising in the right of way? And then questions about public input. Where are we? Is it enough? What have we heard? Lots of comments about public safety, concerns about precedent in the right of way. The kiosk itself, the device, how does it function? I'll take a deeper dive into that one about the minimum 25% public content and how that relates to the 1 out of every 8 slides. That can be confusing, so I'll clarify that as well. Some other questions about the term permit again, and the controls, the levers that the city has going forward to monitor this program. And as a term permit, and that's very important, it's a term permit. And then the role that this plays, we've tried to be clear about that. I'll talk about it again, how we relate to Seamless Seattle and that program. And then I'll end on, and I've also got a slide with equity and sharing how this program is equitable to our city and the community. So public engagement led by Natalie Quick. 4 slides here about how the update. So these are the metrics so far. And this includes website, online, and online survey, and then in-person meetings that we've had. So there have been 450 unique website visitors and more than 600 web page views. More than 150 online surveys have been completed. In-person engagement in May 2024. That was during the One Seattle service. Then there's a future multi-day too. This is something we've been discussing, so we'll bring the kiosk back. We recognize that has the most impact. You all saw that in the very first meeting, so we plan to do that again. And then there's been direct outreach coordinated with Department of Neighborhoods with over 200 BIPOC businesses. And then the materials are translated into Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese. So in person, when I say in person, I was talking to some of our in person is on video, but that's as close as we get sometimes these days. So we've met with the PED board. They were generally very supportive. Their concerns have typically been about accessibility in and around these objects as they land in the right of way. I have met with the First Hill Improvement Association on several occasions, their board, and have briefed their director. Just last Tuesday, we met with the Uptown Alliance, who are very excited about this program. In fact, asked, how do we get one? We're not a BIA. They're very excited about the artist program. Upcoming and what Natalie is lining up are meetings with Belltown, Denny Triangle, the Pike Pine Group, South Lake Union, Community Council, and Capitol Hill. And then we've also got the Mariners and the Public Development Authority associated with the stadiums lined up as well this fall. So we're going to continue to provide outreach to these groups as the legislation works its way through council. So the positives, so now let's try to roll these up into themes. And so we've put them in positives and possible challenges. The positives, lots of response about emergency, the public safety piece. So easy access for emergency calls and supports public safety challenges, including quick access to services, which you can do. as you engage the kiosk. Good exposure opportunities for emerging artists and cultural groups. That's a very common response. Revenue supports additional mid-staff, another one that relates back to safety and the cleanliness of our downtown, as you see on the images on the right, with the mid ambassadors and safety crew. Translation element will fulfill a need for basic services and wayfinding. And the last one is community groups outside the boundaries of BIAs and mid, as I just stated about Uptown, are very interested in this as well and how they might be, as a non-BIA, bring that into their community. Possible challenges include, and these are issues you've raised here, about privacy and advertising and future costs to the public. Questions about how the kiosk would interact with the right-of-way as an element, an additional element in that furnishing zone. Concerns about vandalism, durability, and maintenance. Concerns about keeping pace with technology so kiosks are not outdated over time. And here's what we're doing going forward. So we are going to bring the kiosk back for a multi-day return to engage people and survey them, like the image on the right, that was the one Seattle day. Ongoing outreach to residential stakeholder, neighborhood businesses, tourism, and cultural groups. This is what Natalie's doing in the background, continuing to engage the community. And then continue to promote the website and get people to take the survey to respond. Okay, the functions, a number of things. I'm gonna spend a little time on this one, and then we're gonna go to a video, a couple videos, and just watch two. So the IT team went out and filmed 2 videos of cities where they actually are placed right now, and we'll just watch an 80-second loop. And it will also then inventory the number of the page of its community or advertising. So the top one is, we have 8 slides. The slides rotate all day. There's no differentiation between nighttime and daytime. There's this one continuous loop. So it's not like they're favoring advertising during the day, during rush hour, and then night show all the community content. One continuous loop. Each slide goes for 10 seconds. The content of the public slides can vary during the day so that a variety of messages and art can be included on those non-advertising slides. So second column there, annual or row, annual minimum over the course of the year, they're 1/4 of the content, so 25% is guaranteed as public non-advertising content. All unsold advertising slides will be filled with public content at no cost. This means the annual average could be above the minimum 1/4 or 25%. In other markets, and this is true, this is the analytics from Ike, that typically ends up being more like 40%. So the daily minimum is no slide deck will ever contain less than 1/8. So 1 out of 8 slides is public content. And the last one's important, and just understand kind of how the advertising works. During the peak advertising weeks, and they sell by weeks, oftentimes by 4 weeks at a time, the deck will contain a minimum of 1/8 slides of public content. Slower advertising weeks will contain more public content slides to ensure that the average minimum of 25% or 1/4 is met. So that just, it's hard to predict what that happens over the course of the year. But again, the guaranteed minimum is 25%. Oftentimes it is more than that. Okay, so now I'm going to go out and grab my, okay, so one's in Atlanta and the other one's in Oakland. And you'll see on the right, it starts to summarize what you're seeing here. First one's paid ad, and then watch it. And this is just pick a day, go out and film it. It's not any particular strategy to it.
And while you're watching this, Commissioner, I think this is the same link I sent to you with your briefing material.
Again, this one's Atlanta. Okay, 8th slide coming up. And we're at half non-advertising in that particular round. So that's an example. Share another one now. So this is Oakland. I think Amazon goes big on this one. I know it's hard with context, but you can also see it's daytime and the nit level up here is higher. It would be above, the 500 because we've got daylight, possibly sunlight. So that's the dynamic light levels that the kiosk, the device uses. You also get an idea how close it is to that curve. It's about 18 inches away with a bus passing. Yeah, 8th slide. So you can see on that particular video, it's well above. It's 3 slides out of 8. There you go. So again, guarantee is that there would be a minimum of 25%, but oftentimes there is more. Okay, on this slide, I'm going to go back to presentation of the. This is the analytics that Ike has provided and analysis over several markets. So what you're seeing on the left of the tables that talk about the visits per month, total year in the middle column there, and then average session duration. And then on the bottom, you're seeing the different apps, top, the first, second, and third most used apps. So on average, markets range from 8,000 to 35,000, over 35,000 user sessions per month. Devices are engaged on average between 265 and 880 times a month. The most used apps are photo booth, directions, eat and drink. There are others like transit and activities and arcade that are used as well. Engagement sessions typically lasted for over a minute, so 80 seconds and just shy of 2 minutes, 109 seconds. The wayfinding portion of this, which we worked with Seamless Seattle on as well. So this is the directions. It's one of the top 3 apps, and Seattle, the directions app will be customized visually and nominally to coordinate with Seamless Seattle. We covered that last time. There's an image on the far right there that shows you Seamless Seattle color, the map type, and everything is coordinated with them. So that's the Ike team, their software engineering group that is coordinating directly with the city on that. Devices, wayfinding tools, complementary and supplementary. Those are words that were taken out of our discussions with the urban design group that's leading the Seamless Seattle program. It is not a core part of their program. If you look in their own manuals and studies, this is part of their overall picture, and they acknowledge that this digital device is better handled by a third party outside of the city because of the technology that changes pretty rapidly. Devices will only be located where there's no Seamless Seattle sign. So opposite, and you'll see this in our location guidelines, opposite side of the street or opposing side of the intersections. We want to keep our distance from their program because it is very focused in on wayfinding and getting on a route from like transit to a destination point. Lighting and sound, lots of discussion around this one. It emits light 24/7. Each device has the sensors. So I pointed out when we're watching the video, they automatically adjust to the daylight, the screen brightness, to whether it's a daylight or nighttime condition. Devices have a maximum brightness of 4,000 nits. That sounds like a lot, but in daylight, it's actually not a lot. And that's when you'll see the 4,000 nits so that you can see the screen. Typical nighttime brightness is 400 nits. That's 500 is the code. That's the next bullet point down, and that meets that's less than the city of Seattle's sign code. Devices only emit sounds through the 911 when I call buttons. That's it. They're otherwise quiet. And the light and glare devices will not have a significant impact on the adjacent land uses. I particularly noticed that I've been walking the streets, taking photographs for some additional night photography. And it's amazing. You'll see this in the visualizations, how much it harmonizes, and it becomes, actually, it's just part of the scenery. It's more things like the street lights that are extremely bright in that kind of time environment. So privacy, more questions about this. So I want to be very clear about the privacy policy. Smart City does not collect or sell personally identifiable information or any other data of any type. Revenue is limited to advertising sales. The only data IKE collects is used for analytics data to help them improve their own device. Seattle IKE devices may include a selfie camera as part of their photo booth application only. So you saw that it was the #1 app. Photos are not stored on the device or retained by IKE. The Seattle devices will not be equipped with any other camera. IKE applications rely on proprietary software developed in-house, user interactions, which are always anonymous, with free Wi-Fi mobile handoff, may involve third-party service providers. Data is not shared. IKE's privacy policy is at the bottom, and you can take a deeper dive if you so choose. Accessibility devices are ADA compliant and follow all applicable ADA laws as required and allow for proper space and access and uses around wheelchairs. You see this in the location guidelines. On-screen capability to lower the screen and application access. So if you're in a wheelchair, you can access and things become relative to your height. Mobile handoff accessibility feature for visually impaired users to have a device features functionalities that are accessible in a familiar way on their mobile phone. There's a braille plaque on the device and spine with a QR code that is scannable, so you can use it on your smartphone. Text size and contrast adjustments are also available. Equitable and inclusive platform. So we have free public content. All apps, community messaging, art, and devices are free for everyone within the public right-of-way to use. They have multilingual capability with device content available in up to 100 languages. Each device can be programmed to reflect the predominant languages within the city, and that's where we are coordinating with Seamless Seattle. Public outreach program is ongoing and includes BIPOC, small business outreach, neighborhood group engagement, citywide organizations, resident outreach, and physical device demonstration. So again, that's ongoing for us, and I shared that with you a moment ago. The device program may expand to additional neighborhood BIAs in the future deployments under separate review. And as I also mentioned, non-BIAs are very interested in this as well. Devices that have been customized to reflect current city wayfinding programs. They're at no cost to the city or the public, and they will not impact current city programs or services, but rather complement them. They provide access to underrepresented artists, communities, expand on that in public benefits. Okay, the SEPA reports, which are currently under review with SDOT, they are the lead agency. This is a non-project or program, and it's a programmatic review. And that's, I think, what we are oftentimes struggling with here. We don't have a thing in the right-of-way exactly here that we can comment on. It's a programmatic review. So there will be subsequent reviews at the project level when these things start to land in the right-of-way. The document, as I said, it's currently under review. So there are 4 pieces, attachments to the SEPA checklist. The first one is the business improvement area map. I'll show you that in a moment. The transportation memo by Marnie. The sign code review, which I'm not going to get into today. And then the aesthetics report, which Site Workshop produced, and I will take a deeper dive into that. So there were some questions about the boundaries here. We have 2 deployments. The first one is only in the in the downtown area. It also excludes, and I'm going to go right to the bottom here, all historic residential zones and shoreline. And that's where the park, the waterfront park boulevard is included. So that's 30 devices within the mid and first deployment. The second deployment is 30 devices in the mid, and then an additional 20 in the BIAs of Ballard, U District, SoDo, and West Seattle. There are other BIAs that are interested. We've limited the first round to this because that's who we have actually engaged. Okay, so summary of Marnie's memorandum. The risk of visual distractions does not necessarily translate to a direct safety impact. Collision studies found no statistically significant direct impact due to on-premise digital signs. Lower speeds reduce the risk of visual distraction. We have 25-mile-an-hour speeds in our downtown. And risks of potential visual distraction can be managed through proper planning, design, construction, and limitations. And we'll show you how we're doing that with our location guidelines. I'll just mention that Marnie did a very deep dive, a scholarly dive into research around the country about this. And so this is well-grounded material in a summary. So the summary of the aesthetics report, the visual impact to the devices as one approaches them, whether from the streets or the sidewalk, is minimal. Their scale is in keeping with the pedestrian scale of the streets as shaped by the street widths, building heights, articulation, and density of other furniture in that landscape furniture zone. From the nearby, the devices are significant objects in the visual field, but are in character with the busy urban context, and that includes the BIAs. The devices fit into the context of a diverse collection of objects in the furnishing zone of these dense urban neighborhoods. That's where the Streets Illustrated wants us to place them. Other elements in the right-of-way, in particular, parked cars, light poles, tree trunks that often obscure views of the devices, both from the sidewalk and the street, until one is quite close to the devices, like right up front. The devices do not block significant views of the streets or building frontages, pedestrians, cyclists, or drivers. Okay, so this is all coming down into the location guidelines, and this is really probably one of the more important deliverables to SDOT, because this is complementary and supplementary to their Streets Illustrated. So we've tried to identify rules to citing these things, which actually are very constraining, so much so that our client is kind of concerned about that, like how that doesn't leave a lot of space. So there are a lot of controls here. So these are added layers. So within the furnishing zone, at least 12 inches from the sidewalk, pedestrian clear zone, and 18 to 36 inches from the face of the curb. That is Streets Illustrated. Perpendicular to the flow of pedestrians and traffic. That's how the kiosk functions, so you can see it. So it's got to be perpendicular. With it, at least 3 foot clear zone around it, so that you can navigate around it safely and freely. So they do not interfere or damage with existing trees. That question was asked last time. And they conform with all other clearance requirements and siting requirements for Streets Illustrated. So do not locate the devices under these circumstances where we have a street that from curb face to building or property line is less than 11 feet, 7.5 inches exactly. On streets with a speed of over 25 miles per hour. All of our downtown streets are 25 miles an hour or less. Have a slope of less than 8%. That's a lot of our east-west streets from the waterfront are steeper than that. So that's very restricting. Streets with unprotected bike lanes or sharrows. So we are only locating where you have a protected bike lane or a dedicated bike lane. Near documented high collision intersections or high task demand areas. Along the same block face is seamless Seattle signs. I mentioned that a moment ago. Within designated landmark, historic, or shoreline districts, we are not locating within those. When installing devices, remove unused signposts and broken furniture as allowed during the permitting process. That would be carefully reviewed. That's our declutter, the same thing that Seamless Seattle is doing. Locate at most 2 devices on any street segment between intersections. And then this last one is on display specifically. So limit the brightness of images between sunrise and sunset using automatic light sensors. At night, when street lights are on, the screens will automatically dim on the light conditions around them. Limit refresh rates and display a brief black screen between content slides. Do not allow flashing images or strobing effects that can be distracting. And do not allow the images that mimic a traffic control device, such as a traffic signal, stop sign, or pedestrian light signal. One of the things we've been working on in Marnie and with transportation operations within SDOT is just the sighting relative to site stopping distance. So this is your ability to, when you're driving or bicycle, and bicycles are actually more restrictive because of their longer braking periods, is to be distracted, then refocus on the pedestrian on the task at hand. And even there's built-in factor of pedestrians looking at their phones or being distracted, jaywalking, doing things they're not supposed to do. So there's lots of safety factors built into this. So the 2 things I'll point out on the right, it's a little hard to see on the screen, but the 55-foot setback is for traffic signals. So this was negotiated and discussed at length with, again, traffic operations or transportation operations within SDOT. And then the second one is the 30-foot, and that's where we have a stop sign or yield-controlled intersection where you can get closer. So that affects, those are different site stopping distances. So there's lots of background to study in this to come up with these figures. So now I'm going to go through visualizations. The highlighted ones, there's 3 downtown at 4th and Union, 7th and Blanchard, and 2nd and Vine. We picked these because they're different. The first one, 4th and Union, has a 30, 50, and mid-block setback. And then two BIAs, one in U District and one in West Seattle. The first one is in 4th and Union. This is where we have 3. First one's at 30 foot. In each one of these, we have noted proximity to the intersection, the zoning, the street type, land use, curb use, and bicycle facilities. The 4 views are the sidewalk view as a pedestrian approaching it. And then below that one, in the lower left, is the opposing view, either across the street, across the intersection. And then we have a bike view on the right, or bike or street view as you approach it. And then further back at the block view. Part of this was your comments of asking for this range of views. So this next one is the 50-foot. And these were done before our site stopping distance, have you? So they do give you, I think, a pretty good idea from each one of these perspectives. And then the last one is the mid block. And see the lower left changes the opposing view. Now you're looking across the street at the Key Bank. Next one, and I like this one because not only did it work on this place, but it shows the nighttime shots. And it really, and the ones on the left, the sidewalk view and the opposing view, show it in context of a nighttime view. And you see the ambient light, you get an idea of street lights, how bright they are in the lower left relative to the object. And in this case, we even have the old pink elephant, which is lit. And then on the right, you see the bike lane upper right, that view as you approach the sign. This is a wide right of way, a very wide. Our avenues are 90 feet. And in this case, Amazon decided to, as part of their process, took back and part of the right of way. And that's why you're getting more the cycle track and more planting and sidewalk zone. And then the lower right is as a car approaches it. So you see the interaction with, now it's placed within street trees in the landscape. And then the next one's Acquire Street. This is 2nd and Bell. And this is a side street. This is on Vine Street. And upper left, you see it as a sidewalk as you approach. And then down below, as you come across, you walk across the crosswalk 2nd Avenue, and you can barely see the thing. It's within the street trees there. And upper right, again, as a vehicle or bike approaches it. And then a little bit further back, in this case, we've got parked cars, so you can see how they start to interface and scale the kiosk. This one's at the Trader Joe's, or near the Trader Joe's at Roosevelt and 47th. There's the Audi and Volkswagen dealership there. So the upper left is as you approach it across the sidewalk. And then lower left, the opposing view across the intersection, looking back at it. And then upper right, street view again if you're sitting in the bike lane. See off there in the distance. And then the lower right, that's standing at Trader Joe's, kind of mid-block, looking at it. And then the last one is in West Seattle. So this is at the junction of California and Alaska, the kind of primary intersection. On the northeast corner of the intersection, so upper left, you see it as you approach just after crossing the street. And then the lower left is a opposing view looking across. It's a very broad intersection. And then upper right is as a driver approaches it, moving to the west. And then again, the block view from across the street. So hopefully that gives you a good idea in different contexts how the kiosk fits into the urban fabric. Term permit itself, there were several questions coming out of the last meeting. The term permit ordinance, similar to other term permits, we anticipate that it will include language on inspection reporting requirements. So this is a way to monitor the program and its condition. Ike will work with SDOT to determine what reporting is most appropriate. So that is a discussion specifically about this device and what is the best way to report back on it. And then the last one's really important. This is the lever that the city has. So if the term permit ordinance, I anticipate that the term permit ordinance will include language on the permittee's obligation to remove the devices and restore the right of way at the end of the program. So it's anticipated that this would include insurance and bonding requirements based on the cost for removal and restoration. So that protects the city should something not work out. And I'm going to end on the public benefits. And again, discussion with Michael, we thought it was best to really put this into 4 buckets. And we're going to start with what we think is the most important one, which is the financial. The device generates revenue that's very important to the MID and BIAs. We'll show you how that manifests itself and what we see on the ground. Device features and customizations, public safety. We made a big deal out of this last meeting, so we've really drilled down on that one. The IT team has been meeting with the mayor's office and the city departments to understand how the engineering of the device can interface with their uses. Engage mode, that means when you go up and engage it and engage any one of the apps, and then the passive mode, and this is where we're seeing the ads and the city messaging, but also the public art program. So the first one is financial, and there are 2 deployments. First deployment that I mentioned before is 30 devices in the MID only. It generates 1.1 million guaranteed, and that's up front, goes to the MID. All revenue shared dollars up to 1.1 million we shared with DSA over the life of the initial term, that's annual amount. And the bullet points below are what John itemized for us, like what does that buy? So 10 downtown ambassadors to enhance cleaning, hospitality, and safety in public spaces. Those are the folks in the yellow, the safety jackets that walk around. 15 outdoor concerts, 15 outdoor art installations. That's excluding the program that we're already talking about as a benefit. That's separate, the digital art program. 5 electric cleaning trikes, beautification and programming of 2 public spaces or plazas, and 1 electric street vacuum to enhance cleaning of the protected sidewalk. You can see an image in the upper right of that. The investments by DSA will be recommended through an annual proposed mid-budget and work plan and reviewed by an advisory board in the city. So that's an annual thing that the MID already does, or DSA already does. Any revenue share dollars generated in excess of that 1.1 million will be shared directly to the city. Okay, deployment 2, very similar, but this now includes Ballard, U District, Soto, and West Seattle. And it's 30 devices downtown, so that would bring that total up to 60, and then 20 spread around the 4 BIAs. It's anticipated that MID devices will generate an annual average revenue again of $1.1 million to share. All revenue share dollars from the MID will be shared with the city over the life of the initial term of the program, and then participating BIAs receive revenue share dollars for devices within their respective boundaries. It is anticipated that BIAs will receive approximately $40K per device. We don't know how many devices each one, so we did per device, $40K per device to apply to their program services that provide public benefits in their respective neighborhoods. So examples of how they would use them are cleaning, safety, security, marketing, homeless outreach, community events, lighting and beautification, and public art. Each year, each of the BIAs would recommend to the city a specific service investment utilizing the revenue share. Okay, the customization, features and customizations that we're able to do. Public safety is at the top of the list. So as I said, we've been coordinating with the mayor's office and the city departments, fire department, police department, and the care team. So we have the capability and expertise to integrate this into informational systems to distribute citywide directed content via the device platform. This includes city delivering various real-time alerts, including amber alerts, severe weather events, natural disasters, and more. In addition, localized messaging, information, and alerts can be integrated, which include content about disaster preparedness, alerts, Seattle Smart 9/11, et cetera. And examples include location information for Seattle Community Emergency Hub and hub resources in the event of a disaster, and promotion of city trainings, programs, workshop to educate the community and develop skills on emergency preparedness skills. So again, fire department, police department, and care team, all of them have chimed in. So we've really tried to consolidate this into a list where the most meaningful one to each of these groups. Devices are equipped with a 911 button, which can be activated at any time. Community wayfinding during special events are planned or unplanned demonstrations. information on safe, open pedestrian routes when streets are blocked, community information during environmental events, such as smoke, which we oftentimes get in the late summer or fall. Devices display public safety and emergency warnings immediately issued by the city, missing persons, amber alerts, etc. NIC is connected to the integrated public alert warning system, that's IPAWS. All hazards feed, and public safety warnings are displayed in real time without delays. So in addition, the city Seattle Office of Emergency Management, Alert Seattle, warnings to IPAWS are provided by NOAA and Emergency Alert System, wireless emergency alerts, and over 1,100 other federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial authorities certified by FEMA to publish alerts via software packages. That's very complicated, but the streamlined thing is it could go to that team, they would figure out what they're doing is engineering this so they can interface with the kiosk and immediately be placed up onto the kiosk. So,
Mark, just not to interrupt, so we did have a detailed letter from Andrew Meyerberg from the mayor's office that was provided to us late yesterday that I forwarded on to the commissioners that provide not only a little more detail about this, but just the overall program.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just the last one is on emergent health issues, such as the last pandemic that we had. So again, they have the ability to use this and give people direction in the right of way, right at the kiosk. So public content information on when to call 911 versus non-emergency. This is content that can be pushed up to the device on and rotated in per the display rotation that I mentioned earlier. Information on the care response team, that's relatively new to our city and a very important one. It does pool a number of resources under one department and gives directions to people about how to respond or help somebody on the street. Promotion of the fire department, police department, and care team sponsored community events. So they do put these events on from time to time. And the recruitment information, like police officers. There's a heavy recruitment going on right now for the deficit of police officers. And then lastly, free Wi-Fi. I'm going to expand on this a little bit because it relates to privacy. So if a user chooses to connect to the IKE Wi-Fi network, a device ID is shared with the IKE device for the sole purpose of establishing a connection to Wi-Fi, which is powered by their carrier, third-party carrier, T-Mobile. IKE Smart City does not retain or store this device ID data. It automatically is removed from the device as soon as the user deactivates the connection or exceeds the Wi-Fi range. And the data, lastly, is just not shared with vendors, which can only see IKE ID router ID, and not the IDs of the connected devices. Okay, so we go through engaged and passive mode. So engaged mode, we have the promotion of local arts, culture, and community events. So several apps enable this. Event app promotes local events. Art and culture app promotes local culture and creative activities, venues, and destinations. These are hyper local as well. So if it's in Ballard, it's going to promote Seafood Fest or whatever's going on at the farmers market out in Ballard. Activities app highlights local things to do across a range of interests. Economic development through promotion of local business. I've just said this, it's hyper local when it's located, so it's going to really look at the local businesses. When you tap, say I want a restaurant for dinner, it's going to look at the immediate surroundings. Each device provides directory listings of those local businesses and organizations at no cost. Directory listings within each device are geolocated and populated based on proximity to the device and nearby businesses that are featured. So again, it's very hyper local. Interactive. So this is, I've gone through this before, and I'm just going to restate it. So we've coordinated it pretty extensively with the SDOT urban design team that is managing the wayfinding program. So on the right there are the ways that we're doing it with the graphic interface, the color, iconography, the naming conventions, and even the map type, and then the languages, depending on where the kiosk is placed. So it's easily updated content within the downtown landscape as it evolves and the seamless Seattle evolves. And the curation applications and mapping can highlight and provide information on walks, local points of interest, etc. And then promotion of civic and social resources is an important one as well. There's a social services app, safe shelter app, job board app, civic resources app, and then poster apps can also promote city resources, messaging on any of the city-wide information in advance. The last one I'll end on is the passive mode. This is where we're getting into the slide rotation. So community and city messaging, the DSA and IKE will coordinate display of messaging related to local nonprofits, neighborhood councils, DIAs. And they'll also partner with the appropriate city departments to coordinate community and city messaging efforts. And then I'll end on the public art. The way that program works is DSA will manage it with IKE. IKE has a national program. You heard them speak at the last meeting. It's a very well-established program. It's fully funded. There's no cost to DSA, so IKE bears those costs. DSA already has staff on board, full-time equivalent of Seth Geiser, who showed up at the last meeting and talked about the art program. So the idea is to pay a third-party curator, and this is a way to actually pull in upstarts, people that are trying to get experience with their career as a art curator. So that would happen annually, and it would be a new curator would be engaged annually for peer-to-peer engagement. An advisory artist selection committee will consist of DSA, IKE, and local arts organizations. When we were meeting with Uptown Alliance, one of the fellows, Pinky, is on the Uptown Alliance Art Council, and he said, boy, can I be on that committee? So he was very interested in it, especially how we can engage up and coming artists that maybe don't have the exposure or have a hard time displaying their art because of the different media they're in. Art content is refreshed on a quarterly basis with at least 3 new artists each quarter. During each quarter, an artist piece will run alongside all other content displayed on the kiosk continuous throughout the day and night. The amount each piece is displayed will fluctuate, but each piece is typically displayed hundreds, if not thousands of times across the network over the course of each quarter. The artist will get an honorarium of $500 minimum. And the artist agreement, Kate, you mentioned this, caught us on this one. It's on the what we said, bear waiver. IKE has a limited license agreement to display the artwork, and the artist retains the intellectual property rights in the underlying piece, so their rights are protected. And that is it. That's the show. So I'm going to give it back to you, Michael, and the chair, for questions and comments.
Thanks. I think what we'll be doing next is opening it up to public comment. It looks like there might be there are a lot of people who are attending online. There may only be 2 or 3 people who are interested in making comments. For those who are attending online and want to make public comment, I think there's a hand raising opportunity for you to do that. If you could do that, that'd be great. I see Craig Schaefer. Thank you, Craig. Ren, thank you. Before we start, and I think we'd like to hear just very briefly from Beverly Barnett, and I think we'll ask people within the room. Claire, John, is there any kind of final comment that you have before we pivot to the rest of the meeting?
I would just
not to put you on the
spot. No, just the timeline and the World Cup is sort of an endpoint milestone. This is important, I know, to the mayor and us. I just want to make clear to the commission, we haven't proposed this initiative solely to satisfy the 750,000 wonderful people that will be here for a month and a half or so in June of 2026. We think that's going to be an incredible party for our city. We proposed this initiative back in 2018 or 19 before we knew Seattle was going to be a host to these wonderful games. So we think there's incredible local value out of this initiative and this technology, both in the benefits the hardware itself provides and how the revenue can be utilized.
Thanks.
I'll only add thank you for your time. This has been a really thoughtful, deliberative process. I've learned more about our product than I had before, and having to respond to some of these really hard questions. And I think we've made the program better. And I hope that you'll recommend for us. And we're excited about the future and partnering with Seattle. Thank you.
Beverly, any kind of final comments from ESTA?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Beverly Barnett with Seattle Department of Transportation, and our key staff in ESTA that have been working on this program are unavailable today. So I was drafted, but given a little script, so I'll just get this brief paragraph into the record. But I would also like to echo and say to the Design Commission, thank you for your thoughtful work on this. I know you guys have a hard job, but I really agree with what was said. I think your work makes all of our work better and makes the end product better. So thank you for all your noodling. And so here's what Amy has asked me to convey. She wants everyone to know that we're still very much engaged in the review process. Currently, we're working with the component team on the draft SEPA checklist and the other documents that will be a part of the analysis. The MOU, the term permit resolution, and term permit ordinance. And she is really looking forward to getting the comments and recommendations from the Design Commission to include as part of the permit review. Once the SEPA process has been completed, that's the threshold determination, publication, comment period, appeal process, if any. Amy will be incorporating all of that information into the term permit legislation. And it's only after all of this SEPA review drafting has been completed that the legislation will be forwarded to the city council for their consideration. So, and I sit by Amy, I know everyone is very actively engaged in a lot of discussions and a lot of meetings. So that's Amy's voice.
Thanks, Frederick. Why don't we, I think what we'll do is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say there may only be about 2 people in the room that want to make public comment. I have, I'm going to start with Tom. Could you? No, I just couldn't. What's your last name?
It's Bender.
Thank you, Tom. And Robert, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, please.
Why don't we start with Tom and then we'll go to Craig Schaefer online, Robert, and then finish online. Was there anyone else that wanted to make a vote? Then we'll do 1, 2. Tom, why don't you start?
Well, I've been in the last couple of meetings as well. I'm a local designer. Worked downtown at Bend for over 30 years. Done a lot of public civic projects, big private now. So we're not a direct competitor to peers around here. However, we're closing the a lot of my peers, people in the office, and this really from the sole point of advertising. We just don't need digital advertising on our streets in Seattle. Mentioned the sign code and sign code review about that today. Sign code, the reason why these people are obviously going for it is these aren't approved in the sign code. We have a 500 nits maximum, not 4,000 nits during the day. And we're saying 400 at night. We've had these issues with Seattle Center and other areas. 4th and Union, very disturbing location for me to have one of these first ones. That's where my office building is. I will be at turn lane right next to this every single day. We already have a illegal digital, quote unquote, on-premise digital sign, which is illegal for sign code, directly diagonal from where this will be located. So I get to look at that every day. I'll get to look at this while I'm sitting waiting for the turn light or for the bike lane lights change, everything else like that. Then I come around the corner on the Union. We have another illegal billboard, digital billboard on the parking garage across from Memorial Hall next to the triple door. There's another one around the corner from that. I don't see that one as often. So I have to look at 3 digital advertising sources every day for the week that I come out. That's frustrating to me. And to say that these are not going to be any brighter or any more obnoxious than anything else, that's not true. That particular stretch of 4th and Union, we've lost almost all of our retailers, except for all the national brands. So we've got some national restaurants that are in. We have 2 banks in our block. And the only local source is my optician. Everything else on our building is boarded up. The store is gone. Patagonia is gone, or Pendleton's gone. DCC is gone. I know there's rumor now this week they're supposed to come back. But again, we have a vacant block. Nobody on it, other than the people that work, the handful of people that work. Buildings at like 30% occupancy. So it really makes no sense to put it there. We have a really nice clean sidewalk currently. And now we're going to have this thing right outside of the key bank manager's office. I'm sure his clients are going to love staring at this all day long.
No, I'm not gonna like it. Again, sign code doesn't work, that's why they're going for a term payment. $1.1 million. What is $1.1 million? I'm sure we all like to have it. We all have, I bet every one of us in this room has an iPhone or Samsung or something. We replace those more than every 15 to 30 years. Why would we have these for 15 to 30 years in a term permit? Term payments for signage. We have wayfinding system as just implemented. We'll start to refine. Doesn't have advertising. And it's still the advertising. All the safety things, the smoke alerts, everything else like that. Think of them on my phone. I'm sure you guys do. Camera alerts, everything. So I could go on. I don't want to explore somebody else, but just let you know that most of the design community in the area opposes these primarily because of digital admin.
Thanks, Tom. We do want to try to keep it to 2 minutes per commenter, but thank you. And I think you had provided written comments as well, and I think we forwarded them. All right. Commissioner, thank you. Why don't we then take online Craig Schaefer? If you could limit your comments to 2 minutes, that'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it. And great presentation. It's impressive. You got people done a lot of work, and we're anxious to get these installed downtown. I'm speaking on behalf of the Convention Center and the Visit Seattle boards, which I'm a member of. I'm also a downtown hotel owner. So we currently don't have a tool in the downtown atmosphere to help tourists, visitors, guests to downtown to navigate the city in a more thoughtful and intentional way. The addition of translative services, social and public service information for those in need, emergency services, and a depth of engagement that goes beyond finding restaurants and hotels is a needed tool. And as a hotel owner, I can say that I'm at one of my properties every day for the most part, and I watch people. I'm out on the street. I'm watching, and you can tell when it's somebody from out of town or somebody that is not familiar with downtown. Some still have paper maps, and that's kind of interesting to see. But most people, they probably have iPhones or so forth, but there still doesn't allow them to do what this would do, and it would. I've seen people very confused by looking at their phone and spinning around and so forth. And I think this also adds a bit of what I like about life in the city. I think that it looks alive, and I think we need that in terms of where we're going with revitalization. So we're fully supportive. We're looking forward to it. I remember talking about this before COVID, I think. Weren't we doing that? But so it's great to see the advancement that you made on it, and supportive, and can't wait to see them in action. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Robert.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Robert Smith. I'm K&L Gates. I'm also a Seattle resident with Fremont. I want to thank the Commission for your efforts to try to evaluate this project and answer some of the difficult questions that have been presented as you've worked through this process over the last several months. While we appreciate your hard work, there are just too many unresolved issues with the IKE kiosk project to warrant approval and move forward at this time. The IKE project proposes a drastic expansion of off-site advertising locations throughout Seattle. As you know, the Commission is asked to approve approximately 80 kiosks deployed citywide. Each kiosk would include off-site advertising. The initial deployment would place 30 kiosks within the downtown Seattle area. Have IKE and DSA provided enough evidence that there's a significant public benefit to the city to warrant a significant change in the city landscape? The applicants highlight wayfinding as a major public benefit. But how do the kiosks provide wayfinding benefits? Can the same objective be achieved by upgrading existing structures or providing seamless Seattle signage? Even IKE has seen in prior meetings that the main benefit that the users use is for selfies. DSA has cited city communications also as a public benefit. The members of this commission have pointed out that only one slide out of 8
must be split between all the city representatives such as care, the fire department, police department, and art installations. That works out to approximately 7 seconds of every minute of signage. Given that distribution, will most people pass by the kiosks without ever recognizing city messaging? The third stated public benefit is more income to downtown Seattle, the DSA. However, as was pointed out previously, 25% of the revenue goes to DSA directly. Is a 5% financial boost to DSA worth constructing 30 kiosks that mainly generates revenue for private companies through advertisements? Finally, let's touch on process. Has the commission been provided with information regarding the location of the proposed kiosks specifically? Will the Department of Transportation be authorized to make all other siting decisions? How will concerns from other departments, like planning and the historic preservation program, be addressed? Will the commission be engaged in considering aesthetics, visual impacts, traffic and pedestrian safety, and other issues, which are all determined by the location, the specific location of the proposed signs? Will you have access to this information? And indeed, will the commission have an opportunity to comment on anything once the programmatic framework is approved? While we understand it's not the commission's role to interpret the city's sign code, city planning staff have already raised concerns that the project is inconsistent with city sign regulations on off-site digital advertising. What type of precedent does this set? What does this mean for other companies that want to propose similar projects? We respectfully request the commission answer these questions, as well as consider other alternatives that may be less impactful to the city landscape before the commission moves forward with proposals. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Client clarification, are you representing a client or resident?
I am a city resident, but we're also representing Intersection Media.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Ren Wilson online. Ren, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, good morning. I am speaking on behalf of the Ballard Alliance, and I would like to convey our support for the Ike kiosk proposal. As an organization, the Ballard Alliance represents hundreds of businesses and thousands of residents within downtown Ballard. The Ballard Alliance has had multiple opportunities to experience Ike kiosks, both as a functioning kiosk in other major metropolitan cities, as well as during one-on-one conversations with Ike representatives to discuss details about the kiosk's function and viability in a city like Seattle. Without a doubt, our Seattle community would significantly benefit from Ike kiosks, particularly in a neighborhood like Ballard. Ballard's unique and charming business community, the National Nordic Museum, Seafood Fest, historic Ballard Avenue, and the Farmers Market attracted up to 1 million unique visitors and 5.4 million visits to the Ballard Business Improvement Area in the last 12 months. Additionally, the Ballard Locks alone attracts over 1.5 million visitors annually. The Ike kiosk can play a valuable role in assisting these visitors and helping to drive them to our local and independent businesses. Not only does the design match the characteristics of our urban environment, but the flexibility of frequent programmatic updates allowed by the kiosk allows for efficient adaptability to our changing business and community environment. I encourage the Seattle Design Commission to support the Ike kiosk proposal without delay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ren. Did you give us your name to
Blake Substrom. With the Downtown Seattle Association. I'm the manager of the Community Safety and Hospitality team, the ambassadors we spoke of earlier. I just wanted to speak to the context of how these Ike kiosks would be of value to ambassadors, to visitors of downtown, to hotel guests, etc. Currently, our ambassadors often use the current wayfinding that you'll see at Westlake Park, from the library, you pop out of Symphony Station. The maps there. And our ambassadors often can point out a tourist or visitor lost, looking around, they're using their iPhone, they're using their map, they're still trying to kind of figure out, they don't have something that kind of anchor their visit and their approach to the city. You pop out of the light rail from SeaTac and you're just surrounded by buildings. And where's my hotel? Where's the restaurant? Where can I get back for a few minutes? And so our ambassadors are currently utilizing those wayfinding tools in the city. And these eye kiosks, we believe would be a valuable asset. It's an immediate eye-catching thing that they'll see. They'll know where to find a hotel. Our ambassadors will be able to see those folks get drawn to that as well. Just like we currently use the maps that are surrounded through the city, again, Occidental, Westlake, and those other parks. So yeah, we definitely see this from the operational ambassador standpoint. It's going to create a much more welcoming environment. Seahawks games, I don't know how often we get folks coming in and out the airport, off the CTAG, light rail, and they are just completely lost. They don't know where their hotel is. They think Pike Place Market is behind them when it's in front of them, and all sorts of things. And again, we think these kiosks would be valuable to our operation. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Hudson, 2 minutes of public comment, please. Morning, Alex.
Good morning. It's good to see you all. I'm here today as the executive director of Commute Seattle. And our job here is to represent the hundreds of thousands of people who are trying to move around in the city of Seattle. And we're especially focused on folks for whom choosing transit is not part of their daily kind of routine already. So in my job, I see firsthand that the biggest barrier for visitors and people who are like transit curious is just a lack of information. Folks don't know the names of our agencies. They don't know where to get Orca cards. They don't know what the fare is. And this lack of the basic information about how to choose transit is a significant barrier. I'll tell a little story. We're so happy to open Linwood a couple of weeks ago, and we had a big table at this event. So this is thousands of people who are coming to a transit-oriented event. And I had dozens of people just ask me, where do I get an Orca card? So this information barrier it's really real for people. So people end up turning to Google Maps. They try to figure it out on their own, and it creates a lot of confusion and frustration. And I think we all know that it just takes a couple of frustrating experiences before somebody takes that option out of their mental options here. So these kiosks, I really think, are a good way for us to get that information directly to people without needing for them to have that baseline information, like what is even the name of the agency in hand before we make it easier for that. So we think that this is important not only for visitors and the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who visit our city every single day, but for folks right here in Seattle who are transit curious, who are wanting to take advantage of the excellent and increasingly better service that people are being provided. And we think that this is a common sense way to get people the information that they need so that they can make a full suite of choices, take advantage of our infrastructure, our service investments here, and become, if not lifelong, then at least more habitual transit riders along the way.
Thanks, Alex. And finally, our last person online and last comment will be from Chris McKay. Chris, you have 2 minutes, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris McKay. I'm the director of the West Seattle Junction Association. That's the BIA over in West Seattle. And if you're from West Seattle, you know what a tight-knit community we are, and we love to focus around our events and our shops. I really believe that something like Ike would benefit us highly just because of that. People come in, they're looking for particular unique shops that they can discover. I think Ike could help them in that discovery. I also really believe it would be beneficial in the many events we have. We're bringing tens of thousands of people to West Seattle, just lining them up so that they can see what's coming, helping them find where our art walk participants are, or our wineries and our wine walks. I just think people would have a lot of fun engaging with it, but I just think it'd be extremely beneficial. And of course, we could use that extra revenue in our BIA budget. So I strongly support the Ike Initiative, and I'd love to see one in West Seattle. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Not seeing anybody else in person or online for public comments, so we'll go ahead and close that out. I think we have a strategy to proceed with commissioner discussion, deliberation, and any potential outcome today. Before we do that, I just want to say personally, thank you, Mark, Clay, the team. We've thrown a lot at you. I think, and I really appreciate you saying, Clay, I think it's made the project stronger. So whatever outcome as a result of this that is in our recommendation, from our recommendation that forward to council, it's a much clearer picture of this project and what it might mean for our community. So thank you for committing to the work. Thank you for a lot of hard work. It's been very, very helpful from my perspective. I think it explains the project to the commissioners in a much fuller way. So again, thank you for the work.
Okay, so now we get to our nibbling time, to paraphrase Beverly. Here's what we're going to do. We've heard from the design team now 3 times, but since this is the last presentation, we're going to see if any commissioners have questions. So we'll go, as a usual fashion, we'll go around the table. Don't feel compelled to ask a question, but if you do, we want to make sure you have the opportunity. And then we're going to get into deliberation. I'll read a little bit of a statement about how we frame that when we get to that part. And then depending on how that discussion goes, we may actually have to take an action today on a vote. Before we do any of that, I really want to state on behalf of the commission, I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way, thanks to everybody who provided public comment today, at previous commission meetings, and in writing. It's really helpful, I think, for all of us in our deliberations here what the broader community thinks. I mean, we always want that, and it's really appreciated, and I think it helps us with our work. So we'll start with questions for the team, and then I'm going to start over by you. So if you have any questions for the presenters.
Thank you. Great presentation also. On the percentage of revenue, the $1.1 million that's being shared with the DSA, is that a percentage or is it fixed?
It is a percentage, and the 1.1 is based on projected revenue.
Right. So as advertising costs go up over the next decade or so, then that it's not fixed.
Exactly, and that's the goal of that, to make sure the DSA.
Yeah. And then you said excess of 1.1 million to be shared with the city. Is that shared with the city, or anything in excess of 1.1 million goes to the city?
The excess amount above 1.1.
I'm assuming that's the percentage. It's a percentage of that as well, right? So it's all. And then I thought I heard you say, Mark, that there was 30 planned in the initial phase, and then only 20 for all of the surrounding areas in the second phase.
So 30, first deployment is 30 in the mid. Second deployment is an additional 30 in the mid, and then 20 to be shared.
Got it.
Before BIA.
Right here. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Understood.
So 80 total.
Got it.
30 and then 50.
And then, you have, I saw somewhere between 860 and 260 visits per kiosk per month. And it looks like a lot of those are in the Selfie Act or the Selfie app. So in Atlanta, if it's like down to 260 visits, so 8 visits a day per kiosk, not a lot of public interact or not a lot of engagement on people coming up and pushing, using, doing stuff with those. Is that because it's a newer program or just?
I actually think that's pretty high. So our national average is about 400. So right in the middle of those two polls, but we wanted to give you all sort of an accurate range of our national business. So it's about 400 uses per month per kiosk. So over 10 times a day, someone is walking and using the kiosk for more than an hour.
Or more than
That's a lot. If you compare this to other, bike share or other right-of-way amenities, this is actually pretty high usage. And if I can speak to photo booth as well, you mentioned that. I think one interesting thing that we found is sort of anecdotal, but I think we saw it in the data as well. Photo booth is really high. I think selfies are part of our national culture for sure. What we see is that when you're using selfies, you're also using directions or drink or something else. So it's sort of like an entry or exit application. So you walk up, you find where you want to go. Oh, there's a selfie. Let's take a photo. So I think that helps explain some of why that usage is.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Two, I believe. So thank you again. It's a lot of information and I appreciate it. This is probably said before about the art program, but I know Ike runs it, or coalition between Ike and DSA. Is it a national pool of artists or is it local or is it both? I just.
It's local. It's local. We're just tapping into Ike's team nationally that is managing, what, 17, 18 installations in major cities. So we're leveraging their national expertise, but then bringing it down to our expertise locally, and specifically with DSA. And you saw Seth Geiser at the last meeting with management, and already does a wonderful job, I think, of curating the displays in the plazas right now.
And then understanding that it's an 80 unit program for the term permit, with the initial 30, and then the additional 30, that was in the mid, and then 20 exterior. Is there exterior BIAs? Is there a review process in place that you intend to do? And excuse me if this has been said, but what is the post occupancy, let's call it, evaluation of those 30 and how which the next 30 get deployed, based on usership or based on feedback? Is that in place?
Yeah, I can jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I would say, in our MOU, and I would expect some of this to be in our term contract documents as well. So we give quarterly and annual reporting to the city, and that's, obviously revenue, but usage, kind of success metrics. And then the city obviously has a gatekeeping function in helping us pick locations. And then the entire phase 2 is city and our DSA's mutual discretion. So I think all of that will give information to the city to be able to make a decision.
And I would just add, Phoebe, that it's not just top down, it's bottom up too. The BIAs participate in this annual review and get to, probably comment on the device itself, but also the use of the revenue. So there is a back and forth.
So that is in place after the 30 though too, right? So that is that's that annual review and then it's post pilot program to be able to, assess the opportunities.
Yeah, so there are mechanisms, right, to gauge the success of the program.
I'll defer. Molly?
Let's see, so this first one is a kind of a two-part question, but it's related. So I'm curious if engagement of adjacent businesses would be part of the site selection process, and similarly, is there a kind of cultural component, cultural business selection component to those locations? I think there's some areas that we'd be more comfortable seeing these than others. If you have a really important historic building, historic business that you might not want to compete with compared to an area where the businesses are really supportive of that might direct you to some of those very Seattle locations. Is there anything in the process for that?
With the permits, when it gets to that phase, I assume with SDOT, there will be outreach to businesses and work with the BIs, the mid, to that would be a factor. In the guidelines, we state that we won't locate, for instance, in front of somebody's entrance. So we're engaging from that standpoint with adjacent land uses and property owners or businesses. So I would assume we're talking about the permit process. We're right now in a programmatic review, but that can be part of that process as each kiosk individually is cited on a block base.
Okay. That's helpful. Next question would be, so you talked about the way that Seamless Seattle, the graphic quality of Seamless Seattle is incorporated into these. Are there graphic standards associated with the 75% of the time when there's advertisement on the screen?
Are there graphic standards associated with, I'm trying to understand that one.
So are we allowing any advertisement that is out there within the country could show up on these screens? Or are there any kind of mechanisms in other cities in which you work where cities will say, these are some of the things that we allow within our advertisements, these are not. These are kind of
Content, yeah, sorry.
Content, but not visual quality.
We think of them as content standards, and that's it can kind of overlap with graphic standards, so it's things we don't show, and this is common, and of course it's city specific, but, nothing lewd, nothing obscene, no tobacco, no firearms, that kind of stuff. In addition, we have sort of graphic standards of like nothing flashing, nothing strobing. If you do like an all white screen, it's actually very bright. We don't do that. So there are certain graphic standards like that. It wouldn't be something that sort of relates to seamless in the advertising. I don't know if the city would want that because it would sort of blur the messaging. But yes, we do have content standards.
And are there any cases where a city is discussing those with you, working on specificity to that city for what, mentioning the all white screens, are cities able to work with you to say, these are some of the things we do and do not want to see in terms of like color palettes in these areas?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, every city has some unique sensitivity, and we take that on a case by case basis and expect to be certain.
And Molly, the MOU that we have, DSA has with the city that's not been executed yet, that's in draft form, has content standards. So the city through that is asserting their desires for content.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I know you briefed the head board. Have you briefed the disability board yet relative to visual, low vision issues or anything like that?
We have not.
Okay. That's fine. I think it gets to the sort of local concerns about sight and color noise.
Yeah, good suggestion.
Okay, sorry,
Oh, no, that's a great one. Another one would be, so knowing that some of the kind of arts events in our city can be relatively immersive, when we have like big mural events or things where people are being asked to walk through our public streets and interact with art in those spaces, is there opportunity in those times to exclusively show artist content? So for that 75% advertisement not to occur at those times when it's really relevant to those major art events?
Yes, and we've done it before and would love to do it here. One example I think we talked about in our earlier meeting in Houston, we worked with a local photography camp and a really prominent photographer and put up a bunch of student art on all of the units around town. In Houston, we have many, many units, and across the city for a couple day period, it was only student art. We're really proud of that.
And then when will the ongoing public outreach be complete?
Well, I can say, Molly, that we have things lined up for the fall. So I don't, complete. I mean, what we just talked about going into the permit, I don't think that it really stops. I think the major outreach for the programmatic review would probably end this fall at some point, as soon as we feel like we've connected with as many groups as possible, which has been a challenging exercise to get on their calendars. It's not without effort or trying of you. So that's why we have ongoing. And so this fall, maybe it leads into technically winter, but we are trying to parallel it with the programmatic review.
I would just say, once these are in the ground, Molly, I think there's a different phase or flavor of outreach that we would continue with small business attractions, the arts and cultural community, others, to make sure that the content that we have influence over, as well as the applications when they're in engaged mode, are delivering the best value and benefit to the community. And so we would have a person in-house that is sort of responsible for on the content side, for interfacing with Ike, in addition to Seth that would help us deploy the art programs, but we would continue engagement and outreach with the community so we can make sure these are most relevant to people's interests and needs.
Thank you. And I have one more, I apologize. So I'm curious if, related to the public benefit, you mentioned the kind of cleanup of the block. Has there been conversation about supplementing the block in any ways? I saw there was some of the locational areas where I was seeing kind of gaps in street trees. And so I'm curious if things like gaps in street trees would be considered on those blocks, feeding where there is activated frontages nearby.
Mhm.
If any of those other furnishing those street amenities that these will compete with in the future that could otherwise be in those locations, if those would be considered as these are deployed.
It's not currently part of our public benefit package, but it is possible.
Thank you. I'll pass it on.
I have a question about
accessibility and equity. I see a goal is to make equitable access to city resources, and if only 25% of what is displayed is being shown, I'm wondering the language barriers, because I know that the devices can do 100 languages, but the city resources are only being shown for like seconds out of 60. How are we going to get to the communities that actually need to see these resources?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, sure. Clay, you can answer too, but there's an engage mode where you can immediately engage the applicable app that would actually direct you to those rather than just waiting for something to rotate and see it. So there's a way to actually engage the kiosk immediately to find wherever you're going for a service, community events, wayfinding in a language, so that it's that engage mode that I think is maybe going to be of service.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's sort of two components of the kiosk, and then there's other accessibility, I think, measures we take. But the passive mode, 25% of that time will be city content, and over the course of a year, that will sort of invite you to the kiosk, and that we can do translated. Most information we show is multilingual, so right away, hey, this is touchscreen, and it's delivering in your native language. And then once you walk up to touch it, like Mark said, everything there is advertising free. All of that is just based on proximity to the kiosk and whatever customizable content the city wants to put on it. So we'll, in any city, and we're rotating out content constantly, but we're programming about half the applications with just, here's a city resource, here's find it, fix it, and that can be translated. And that takes you to, directly to city resources. So I think there's once you click on the kiosk, and then the outside, we do make sure to rotate that content and do it.
Thank you.
I have one follow-up question, kind of related to Molly's questions about sort of the approval for each site for these kiosks. So as I understand it, that's going to be a purely administrative process. Kind of once council, once we do our work and once council, does or does not approve this programmatic term permit, each specific site will be an administrative process through SDOT to review that particular location. That's correct, right?
Correct.
So I guess I'm just curious about how you anticipate, city staff being sort of potentially asked to resolve what are somewhat political questions. So if, for example, if there's a lot of negative feedback received at one particular location, in my experience, city staff are usually loath to kind of adjudicate political questions, and rightly so. I think the sort of all the physical criteria that have been outlined are really great, and I think they'll be able to do a fantastic job evaluating those. But how is a SDOT staff person going to be able to decide if a certain amount of public comment warrants not approving a kiosk at a certain location?
So similar to, I guess, the other object in that furnishing zone, whether it's a bike rack, a bench, a bus shelter that's getting abused. I'm getting above my pay grade, Zubin, so I'm not gonna be, but I'm assuming there's a mechanism within there. We know there's find it, fix it, and other mechanisms where you can report something. I can't answer the question like exactly how administratively deal with that and determine if that needs to be removed or something needs to happen to it. I don't. Anybody else in our team, Brian?
I was going to.
Yeah, generally the goal is to have specific criteria that SDOT can administer. I think case law would say public community sentiment are the grounds for approving or denying something at the administrative level once a policy decision's been made. So that's the way I'm thinking of it, but Beverly.
Yeah, I think that is correct. There's not really a lot of notice and public engagement when we look at putting out these individual kinds of things when there is legislation that guides it and established criteria. I think this is different than a bench or a bike rack. So I don't know moving forward with implementation if there would be other things that we would need to address in the department when we're putting things out there, and whether that would be something that would be in the agreement or in the term permit legislation. But it is a little bit different. But I think we do have experience in engaging with a broad range of community input, so we would figure something out.
Very delicate way. Thank you, Gabriel.
And I guess, typically staff is evaluating, collecting that information, and then it's, part of a land use action. And so we're kind of being asked to do that work now, essentially in advance for all these locations. So I think that's what we're all struggling with a little bit, is just the site specificity, that could be warranted at sort of a higher political or social decision-making level, being applied to all these sites. So, but I appreciate the answers. I think that really clarifies kind of where we are. So,
in any recommendations that you as a commission consider, that might be something that you recommend if the department will be tasked to issue site-specific permits. I think that's the intent. You may want to make recommendations. Is there a rule to help guide and negotiate that? Is there changes to the existing term permit ordinance to help provide some greater tools for the department to shore that up, the locational criteria? That could be something that you recommend ultimately to the council for them to consider, to give the department a little more tools to deal with some of the gray areas, some of the concerns that might come out.
I think Phoebe, maybe that's getting at some of your questions.
The other side of the coin is dealing with the folks who are asking for them. Craig's already asked for 6. That's the flip side of it.
Right. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Thank you for the presentation. I'm trying to figure out where I want to start here. I think let's start with the land use code. It seems to me pretty clear. I'm looking at 2355.003.7. Signs using a video display method are not permitted in any zone. And then it goes on to, if you've read the sign code, and I'm sure you have, it goes on to this to talk about if it meets the following criteria, it might be permitted. So someone mentioned nits, but there's also size, there's proximity to the street, there's visibility from the street. There's a number of criteria, and this application doesn't seem to meet any of them. And so I'm curious your response to that, because to me, it seems that the zoning code actually supersedes a term permit. And is one of the oldest parts of the code, as I'm sure your attorneys know. That's kind of where zoning came from, and a long time ago was arguing over signs. And so this has been an issue for planners for a while, but I'm just curious to hear your response to this doesn't comply with the zoning code. As far as I can see it in plain English, help us understand your proposal.
I'll give a reply, and also it's something that SDOT might want to ask the city attorney to reply to. My understanding is that you're talking about the sign code, which isn't necessarily the land use code, and that the city retains charter authority for its city charter to make approvals for the right of way. So there's many things that go through the term permit ordinance as a way of granting the right to occupy your space. And in that term permit ordinance, they can grant exceptions to the sign code. So it's a different method of approval. You could amend the sign code as a way of making those exceptions. But I think Michael made the comment earlier on that the term permit process was seen as having more guardrails to answer questions of people who had concerns about proliferation. So
Thank you. I would say,
I'm thinking of it, but I don't want to speak for your.
no, I appreciate that. And we've asked Beverly. Totally, and I appreciate that. And I would like to hear from Beverly, but it seems to me that the term permits are permitting things that aren't essentially selling our eyeballs. And so that to me seems like a fundamental distinction. And so term permits are often about land bridges or sky bridges or other things. And so there's a fundamental distinction, I think, between advertising and infrastructure that those codes deal with. But go ahead, Beverly, I didn't need to.
Well, I think I wouldn't want to say too much because that's going to get over my pay grade, as somebody said, pretty quickly. But, and especially because the city team that's working on this is very engaged with the ICE and DSA team on the SEPA review and what level of review and what needs to be done. So that work is ongoing you know, at some point we'll all be in agreement and things will move forward. But we do use, when the city council passes an ordinance, they can change criteria or what's a part of that ordinance. And we do that sometimes with vacations if we're asking for something different or additive with public benefits. So, you know, the council writes stuff and they can change stuff. They just have to do it in their normal formal process. Whether they would do that here and in what context, I don't know, but there are our tool for code and legislation changes.
Great. Great. So we'll mark that as unresolved. I also had a question about the outreach in the kind of possibly impacted neighborhoods. So Ballard, U District, looked like West Seattle. I think we heard from the business improvement associations who have a clear financial stake in getting these approved. But could you say more about the actual citizen outreach, the members of the public who this will be, whose eyeballs you are selling? What's that outreach been like?
So we have met with a couple of neighborhood groups so far. First Hill Improvement Association and Uptown Alliance. Those are non-BIAs. They both have shown interest in it. And in fact, have asked, like, how do we get one outside of a BIA? I think there have been a number of comments about how it's beneficial to communities, especially day one tourists. People in First Hill, we have 3 primary medical institutions where we have a lot of destination people. And you're about walking off transit. So there is complementary, it does support those folks. Individually, we have done it through the One Day in Seattle, day or whatever it's called. So we've had the kiosk in person. Then people have gone up and used the website and the online survey to give feedback on a set of questions. So if you go up, you will be asked a set of questions that Natalie has provided metrics on. So
Natalie raised her hand too. Did you stop sharing?
no, it says I'm sharing.
Natalie, you had your hand up.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to add a little bit to that. So good question. We've been able to, especially during the summer months when stakeholder groups are meeting less, and you just had less attendance, we were able to work with a lot of downtown and surrounding neighborhood, really trying to get into areas that ring downtown where we could talk to or work with property managers to send out, or HOAs to send out the survey to residents and residential buildings. So we had quite a few of those, just again to try to diversify the comments. And
was
then,
that part of the 150 surveys, Natalie, that you mentioned, or are those separate?
Yep. Nope, that's all. So
that's 150.
Yep. And we can't obviously make people take the survey, but we're trying to at least, I think you're seeing that in the consistent uptick with the website views. You know, at least getting people to take a look at it, look at what's on there, see it more. I think having the kiosk back, we did have it in town for the Mayor's Day of Service at Westlake Park. It was a rainy day. But so I think having that kiosk back for a few days and really using the foundation we've been able to create of different groups that we've talked to and really tried to solicit feedback from, having them partner with us and push out this information to try to get people to come take a look at it will be great. We've also really tried to focus on trying to get some feedback from cultural groups and just, again, more of that equity focused lens. We will reach out again when the kiosk is in town to that BIPOC mailing list we have from DON. So I think that will also help. So hopefully that answers your question.
Sort of. So there was 450 unique website visitors and 150 online surveys. So should we take that to mean basically like 600 people-ish have at least seen this? Because a visitor to a website isn't necessarily feedback, but I'm just trying to understand what the feedback is, or who's seen this.
Yeah, so 450 unique website visitors mean those IP addresses are individual. And then 600 page views mean people are clicking on more than one page and looking at more than one thing. And then from that, the survey is one of those unique pages that they can go to. And so then we've had 150 people take the actual survey.
I see. Okay. Got it. I'm not sure how you'd answer this, but I'm just curious, given the magnitude of this proposal, does 150 responses from the public seem sufficient to say that we know that the public does or does not support this? 'Cause that's important for us as a commission to understand. I think that's something by which we evaluate these proposals.
Do you want me to take that, Mark?
Yeah.
So
I'm
again,
sorry, I'm just doing a little IT here.
that's okay. That's why our outreach is ongoing through the council deliberation and vote process. We're continuing to push this out as hard as we can. I think we sometimes see this same just challenge with creating interest, especially on the survey side with alley and street vacations, and really trying to push it out as far as we can to as many groups as we can and encourage the surveys. We can't, I mean, that's the best metric tool we have to actually gauge response. So that has, it is a challenge to just get people to want to take the time to do that, but we're continuing to push that out, and we'll continue to do that through the council vote.
I would add that not noted in the outreach is we've had the kiosk over the last 3 years, I think at least, at the State of Downtown event that we produced, and that's draws about 1,300 people at each event. So close to 4,000 folks, and those are folks in arts and culture, small business, folks who live downtown, own property, run nonprofits that are attending that event. And so we've had the kiosk on display. Like staff have been there to walk people through it and orient them to it as well. And of course, going forward, the folks that make the ultimate decision on this city council will have extensive public comment that will be open for all voters and residents in the city to participate in.
Great. Okay, thank you. So my last kind of line of questioning here is about some of the financial agreements. So I understand that there's a term permit for 30 initial, and that the deal is a percentage and we expect 1.1 million will go to the DSA. Did I understand that for the next 50, another 1.1 million will be distributed among the other recipients? Do I have that correct?
It's a little more than that. So the 1.1 is a projection based on the initial 30. So in the second tranche of 50, it would be a little bit more than that. So about 1.1 for another 30 and an additional for the 20 that would go into the 4 BIA.
So proportional to the number. I guess that was my question. Yeah. Thank you. That makes sense. And then, I'm just curious. I've kind of, played my hand here, but since essentially we are the product, the public is the product, that's what you're selling, respectfully, that is the product, which is what we're evaluating here. Is selling the public sufficient? Are these benefits sufficient for the deal? What is the percentage that we're getting back? Like, what is that 1.1 million in terms of the percentage of the overall revenue of these? It's hard for us to evaluate if we're getting a good deal if we don't know what the deal is that we're evaluating.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm at liberty to share that. This is a deal that's been negotiated with obviously us, DSA, and the mayor's office. I don't know that I can answer that today. What I can tell you is that we do these deals across the country, and this is one of the most compelling public benefit packages we've ever offered to a state.
And I would suggest you consult the memo that you received from the mayor's office, their articulation of public benefit. He's proposed this as part of the downtown activation plan because he thinks it's a good deal for the city. And the council will make the determination on whether they think it's a good deal for the city.
Good for me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Senator. Kate?
Great. Thanks for the presentation. Just a couple more questions about engagement. Have there been any pedestrian traffic studies of active engagement of the kiosk versus general foot traffic on the street? What is the relationship of those numbers?
So, and make sure we understand the question. So how many people are actually passing by and then do engage?
I'm trying to understand the relationship of people who encounter the
Sure.
kiosk visually as they're walking through versus those who are opting in to interact with the kiosk.
Right. And I don't know if that's part of your data. Do you understand the question?
I think so. So the usage data we've shown today is actual interactions. So that's
Right.
That's like actual usage. Someone is opening up the kiosk for federation. I think you're asking like, what is the conversion rate of people that might pass by? And then
Exactly.
we don't have that data available. It would obviously be a greater number of people that are passing by the kiosk and interacting in it. It would vary by market. I don't have the data.
Right. So just to clarify then, one of the numbers you shared, I can't remember what city name it was, Houston, there was 10 engagements a day. Okay. So for the data that you have about engagements, has there been research into the demographics of the people who have opted in?
No, and we're not tracking any of that information. So we don't know any personally identifying information about any of our users. So no,
What about in terms of people accessing like translation services or choosing to access civically oriented information as compared to like the selfie app?
So we do have app usage data. Obviously, we don't know anything about the folks that are using certain features. What we presented here today was sort of our top 3, which is, tends to be wayfinding, food, eat and drink. All of our applications can get used. I can tell you that I don't have the frequency of any particular apps. And it varies pretty heavily by market and by kiosk location as well. So as you might expect, a kiosk in downtown touristy area is going to have more eat drink than another location.
Right.
Kate, I'll just add that, sorry, we are having technical difficulties with sharing the presentation, but back on that analytics slide, the third most used, there was transit, shelter, and activities. So we're only seeing the top 3, and so there are others as well.
Great. So in the top 3 on average nationally?
Well, these are by city. That we're sharing examples of 6 cities: Cleveland, San Antonio, Tampa, Miami, Detroit, Houston, and Atlanta as a sample.
It'd be great to be able to revisit. So another question about projected revenues in relationship to actual revenues. Could you talk about that in precedence with other cities of a similar size and nature to Seattle?
Sure. So I can say all of our deals are structured this way, where our partners, in this case, DSA and the city, share a percentage of revenues, which ensures that, as I think Commissioner Ben said, as the rates go up, you get the benefit of that. In terms of the percentage, I can't hear the number, like I said, but I can tell you this is a very compelling package. In terms of the value, we're in 20 cities across the country. We understand this advertising product, city history furniture, and we feel really strong about our underwriting of this particular deal, this number of units.
Right. So sorry, just to clarify. So it's generally speaking, though, it's the projection is consistent with actual revenue.
Yeah, their projections. So we can't predict the next COVID, and obviously what effect that would have on our business.
Right.
But yeah, what we've seen across the country is that our actuals come in line with our projections.
Okay, great. And then thank you. And one last question. Since this is a 30-year term permit, is there a 30-year plan for the management of the art program?
Yes, and I would say it's a 15-year.
It's me, sorry.
It's a 15-year term, and then of course it's the city's option and our mutual option to elect the second 15. But we would, we would expect this to be something that's iterative and ongoing. We're committed. What we typically do is change out the art quarterly, and we'll work with different groups over the course of the year, and we sort of plan out a year in advance what we're going to do. It's our commitment to continually invest in that program and find new voices, find new faces, and folks.
Great, thanks. That's it.
Okay, Brian? Questions?
Benefit of going last is all the excellent questions before me. I did have a data question in terms of usage over time and a question of, is this a curiosity on the street and you get somebody to engage with it once and then never again because it's not deemed useful to them? Or is this something that as it lives on a street over time, it gets more heavily used because it gains traction And a lot of the data numbers seem to be snapshots, but not in San Antonio. We are gaining users over time. Could you tell me a little bit about how it's going in other cities and what you're seeing in terms of engagement numbers?
Happy to, and it's a good question. So the data snapshot we're showing is actually a full year. So that's where these numbers are. What you're not seeing is obviously in some of these markets, we're deploying more kiosks. And so there is,
Per unit.
Per network.
Yeah.
But the data is per unit. What we have seen is data increases as the network becomes more mature. And I think it becomes more accessible and more known in the community as an amenity. And our content platform is more robust. So we get more city programming, we get more unique applications. Sort of from a passerby perspective, what we hope to do is you'll see in our slide within 25%, some cool city event that you didn't know about. That's going to encourage you to click on the kiosk. That's going to give you more information, and you're going to get a QR code linking you back to city resources. We hope to be a funnel driving traffic back to the city, back to the DSA's resources. So I think as we get more mature and we're seen as that offering in the community, we do see data.
Can you quantify that? Because I think that's my real question is, are people seeing value? Are they engaging? And does that grow over time? Because I know I clicked in San Antonio. It was a curiosity, and I probably won't touch it again. But is it engaging people? Do people use it as a resource? Or is it for tourists and you really are only looking for like the one-time user? I'm trying to understand that.
I think our year of data showing 400 uses per kiosk per month illustrates that they are being used, and it's across markets that have more or less tourism cases. That's a high monthly usage.
And I would say as the applicant, we certainly see incredible value for folks who have come here for the first time or are not frequent visitors. They may not live here, and our downtown is set up to serve those folks with our stadiums, our arenas, the Vice Seattle, the Cruise Business, two convention centers, major attractors of people. And the universe of folks that are coming to this downtown is constantly evolving. So there's new people every day. We had 3 million people last month come to downtown. So this isn't a fixed universe of eyeballs or folks out on the street that we're serving. We're serving a dynamic population that's constantly changing, that doesn't know this city. And that's why we see value in this product that can constantly evolve with that universe.
Thank you. That's my question.
So I'm going to reserve the last question for myself. I agree with Brian, though. Thank you for all the great questions that have been asked to date. So I only have one question. And Mark, now that we have the presentation back up, can you go to the location guidelines slide? Sure. Because I think this gets to the crux of a lot of it, for me anyway.
The one that showed the minimum width.
Yes, the one that showed the, yeah, thank you. So, so my question about this, and first of all, I presume this is a summary of what will be more detailed location criteria, or are these the location guidelines, or is this kind of a high level summary of the location guidelines?
It's a bit of both.
Okay. My second question is, and this may be a question more for SDOT staff, where do these live? Are they part of the ordinance? Are they, I mean, because to me, these aren't nice to haves, they're need to haves.
Mm-hmm.
So do they have the effect of regulatory authority? So where are they? Are they actually in the adopting ordinance?
I think that's something we've been discussing, what should be contained in the ordinance. Is there another tool? Is there a program agreement that's done? And then a term permit ordinance, does a director's rule need to happen? But yeah, I think we're all in agreement that these kinds of criteria that are going to guide the future work have to be, they have to live somewhere, and they have to be clear enough that we can implement them. But I think there's still different ideas about what's going to be where, that they may have resolved that I don't know about, but we do have a few different tools.
So the specific, what I'm hearing, the specific tool is still, but this will ultimately be part of, SDOT in the city will have regulatory authority to, if this is going in to the pedestrian clear zone, like, no, we're not putting it there. We're not allowing, that's what I'm.
Yeah. That's correct. I mean, I think, Kevin, the idea is it's in the hands of that permit team. And they are guidelines that sit adjacent to Seamless Seattle. One in particular is even the offset from the curb face, right? Code really wants you to do 36, but allows 18 inches. So that's a discussion that's come up with Elise, who, as the interim director, like, I don't want this to become a deviation issue every time we permit it. So these are things that are evolving still.
Yeah, I think part of what's embedded in my question, even though I'm not an attorney, words matter. And I get so a guideline to me is different from a regulation. I don't know if that's always true, but in many cases it is true. I want these, if this is approved, I would like to see, that one's making comment, not a question. These have to be enshrined in a way that they can be regulated and enforced. So that's is that the intent? Okay.
And transparent.
Right. So as an applicant, we can suggest a guideline that could be brought into as a codified, if you will.
Okay. And Kevin, we want the same thing. We don't want there to be any vagueness to how these get cited, because it's going to slow the deployment. I want clarity between the IT team that's going to be out there installing them and the SDOT that's permanent.
Okay. Similarly, we've been very careful about our language, that is legal, and hence the use guidelines.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah.
There was one piece of that. So there's currently a document that is available.
There's a SEPA document. There are the attachments that I shared at the beginning of this section here. 4 attachments to the SEPA checklist, and that can be available. And so the 2 that I was sharing with you today were the transportation memorandum and then the aesthetics report. And that's where I've rolled up, and that's where the location guidelines have come from, both Marnie's and site workshops report.
And has the aesthetics report been made available to us as a commission?
I think we could try to do the timing of the transportation memo and how robust that was has been around for a much longer time period than the aesthetics report. Both documents are with SDOT. I think what you tried to do today is to distill them and represent them graphically. I think there may be more depth of support around the transportation memo and a little more scrutiny going on by SDOT with the aesthetic.
Molly, your question is, are they available?
So the question being, I guess my understanding prior to today's session was that the aesthetic report would be available to us at the time of you all coming back. And so the challenge being not having that and being able to look at how does that compare to Seattle Streets Illustrated, and where maybe are gaps in that? Where are we thinking about ADA pads in front of the kiosk? Just really understanding the fine-tuned details of within that aesthetics and locational component of the report. It's challenging because we're not looking at a specific location. Because when we review at 30% of projects, we can have all of those conversations. And so trying to vote without, or discuss without having, what are the criteria that are, as you mentioned, additional to Streets Illustrated and relate to Streets Illustrated, it's really challenging to buy off.
Yeah, and I mean, it's currently under review with SDOT. And so we are going back and forth with comment resolution right now. So I'm not sure about the availability of that to commission or others at this point. I don't know if you can speak to that.
I don't really think I can, because we're still in the engagement process of questioning, so it's still under review.
It's not final. Yeah. It's I think at the end of the day, the aesthetic, I will say, I mean, the transportation report, I'd let Marnie speak to that, but we tried to represent the summary of it. There is some significant literature and research in there, and math, straight out math, that it determines that site stopping distance. And aesthetics report is a little bit more challenging. it's not something that is there's no set guideline for it. We are not a federal highway, so visual impact assessment does not apply. We're not a big billboard. So it's one that was requested. It has been requested from time to time. And so we are trying to apply certain standards to it. It doesn't get into ADA and the technical things. That is well controlled by the clearances and Seamless Seattle and federal standards. So this is dealing with, visual, aesthetic, the things that I've talked about, light and glare. So I'm trying to represent it as best I can in the outcome, which are the guidelines, and how does it manifest itself? What matters to the permit team when they get it in their hands? And what can they use as a checklist to inform the siting relative to aesthetics? It get into a lot of personal preferences, and our SEPA lead has mentioned this each time we sit down and talk. It's not a perfectly objective defined type of analysis. And I just say that I've personally gone through this in this report. It has been a challenge. We've done our best to frame it within the context of our urban environment, nighttime and daytime.
So unless there's burning questions, I'd like to move into discussion now. Does anybody have a burning question that hasn't been asked?
I have a burning statement.
Okay, good.
And it's, we have a hard stop at 12:30, partly because at 1:30, there's a subcommittee that a number of you were attending about LA Bay Commons. So I just wanted to use that.
Hence my interest in.
Right, yeah. So, but I think we have an hour.
We have an hour left
to do what you want to do.
So to start so first of all, thank you again for the presentation and for answering all of our questions. We've thrown a lot at you in today's meeting, and a number of people, so appreciate that. I'm going to kind of read a little statement here to help sort of frame this. I think just to be really clear, the request before the commission is to approve a program, keyword here, to install up to 80 digital kiosks in downtown and various business improvement districts or BIAs. The request to approve this program was made through Seattle Municipal Code Section 1565, governing significant structure term permits. The city council will ultimately review and approve this proposal. So we are a recommending body, not a deciding body. And we're making our recommendations to both SDOT and the city council. The review of term permits has two distinct elements. First, assessing the implications of a structure in the right of way. Here we're talking about structures. That's another important distinction. And the public benefit mitigation package to offset the implications, which we heard a presentation about today. In this case, we are being asked to assess the implications of a broader program. While the bounds of this program have been disclosed, there have only been sample locations to show the implications of these structures in the right of way. If the program is approved ultimately by city council, it will allow the development team to seek individual permits from SDOT, as we just discussed. This is not the commission's final deliberation on this. At our next meeting on October 3rd, we will evaluate and vote on a final draft report that we will be sending to SDOT and to the city council. For today's meeting, what we want to do is talk through and discuss as a body, because we haven't had the opportunity to do that, the broader implications of this program. And we want to do it to the extent we can around the term permit criteria that are in the city code. There's some of these criteria are more applicable, frankly, to what we're looking at than others. So I'm just going to read what they are. Overall, adequacy of horizontal, vertical, and other clearances. View blockage and implications due to reduction of natural light. That's pertinent. Construction review at 60% conceptual approval. Not really pertinent to this. Interruption or interference with existing streetscape or other street amenities. Effect on pedestrian activity. That's come up in a number of questions. Effect on commerce and enjoyment of neighboring land uses. Also is a subject of some questions today. Availability of reasonable alternatives. Effect on traffic and pedestrian safety. Obviously, that's a factor here. Accessibility for the elderly and handicapped, and the public benefit mitigation element provided by the proposal to the extent required based on the nature of the structure. So I would recommend that we perhaps start our conversation around those applicable term permit. I don't know that we need to go one by one. We could just, I think, make general statements about our overall findings pertaining to these. Given that the design commission has a broader mission in the city, I think after we focus our discussion on these criteria, we might want to open it up to a broader discussion about just our thoughts about the program generally. This program is bringing up, as has come up in questions and discussion, some broader city policy questions. And I think it's fair for us, given that we may want to weigh in on that. So I'm going to propose we do this in those two steps. So first, relating to the term permit criteria that we have in front of us. Does anybody want to, I'm just going to call, we're not going to go around. I'm just going to, let's have a free flowing discussion. I would ask that you raise hands if you want to say something, so I know who to call on, but does anyone want to start this discussion? Yeah. No, thank you.
I apologize here. I thought that the visualization images, the renderings of the street views, at both during the day and at night did a lot to convince me of their inintrusiveness on the street, especially as you're driving by and walking by. I also think that the location criteria of not being in the pedestrian right of way, particularly sort of down the block a ways, removes some of the concerns I had about another thing that I have to watch out for in the pedestrian right of way, which I still feel like Seattle there's still a lot of like things in the right of way and the pedestrian right of way. So I think that helped the visualization aspect of that, just the view blockage in the tracks.
So in relation to the interruption and interference with existing streetscape or other street amenities, I just want to reinforce something that came out of one of the questions. The idea that when citing these and a helpful element of additional public benefit around that, beyond the cleanup of the surrounding streetscape, would ideally be street trees or street amenities within the furnishing zone with which these items could potentially compete, really doing an assessment of that at a block by block level on blocks in which these are being installed, so that it's bringing our furnishing zone in that area up to a certain standard.
I guess is it an assessment, I'm sorry.
No, go.
Of it, if it competes, or, is there an opportunity to leverage, replacement in kind, of like a street tree, or, I would assume in general, like, there's a cadence of street trees and they're also highly difficult to locate in the first place because of underground utilities, as we all know, involves, but, keep using that whole as a compendium of not having the shiny object of the street and letting everything else fall.
And I think these kind of comments are really helpful because these are the kind of things that could actually end up in our final report.
Yeah.
But sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's it.
I have a couple of thoughts, Kevin. Of the criteria, I think I've already mentioned that I bristle a little bit at evaluating this as a term permit because I think that that's stretching that program perhaps beyond what it normally does, given that this is essentially digital advertising in the right of way. That's what we're being asked to evaluate. And I don't see within the term permit language protections or criteria surrounding that. And so I think we're being asked to use a tool that's the wrong tool for the job here. I think the signage code clearly governs. But so with that said, though, I will say within the term permit itself, I think there are two things that to me are blinking red lights. Before I get to that, I want to say thank you to the team. I think you've been extremely diligent about laying these out, about responding to our comments, about finding criteria that will make, that could potentially make these work if they were other pieces of infrastructure. And so I really respect and appreciate the work that has been done. But I think within the term permit, there's two kind of red lights to me. One is the effect on commerce and the enjoyment of neighboring land uses. I see that being problematic in that I don't believe there's been sufficient public process to know the effect of the enjoyment of neighboring land uses. The reason the sign code, in my mind, is so important is because that's directly and immediately what that's about is, can I have a sign on my property and how does that impact the value of your property? These are off-site advertising, and going around the sign code, I don't think really allows us to evaluate the core crux of this. And so I think the effect on neighboring land uses is unknown, but better governed under the sign code. And then the public mitigation elements. Again, I think these are beautifully designed devices. I appreciate Ike and the work that they've done to design them. But to me, when I look about the winners and losers of these, I don't see local residents as being the winners, as being the users of these. I do see us as being the bearers of the cost of these. And so the public benefit elements as outlined in various memos, et cetera, to me are not at all compelling or even logical, really, to mitigate the implication of this in our right of way. And so for those two elements, I think I'm highly suspect of these meeting the term permit uses.
Yeah, to add, what do you mean by bearer of the costs?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I believe that a tourist might click on this and find a map. I do. But I don't believe that I will or you will. And so, but a tourist will see these for one day. I will see them for 30 years. And so I have to look at ads for 30 years so a tourist can click on them one time. And so that to me feels a little bit out of proportion.
I would concur that it's the visitor versus the resident, and it feels like it is for a visitor. And so then, in that way, I can see it much more in the mid, right? Like I see how that is a dynamic group. I know people live downtown too, but you also have a different frame of reference, right? You are part of like a touristic zone. And so it feels like that's kind of part of the package. And I think the concern is the differentiation. Like if you could, that was part of my questioning of like, what's the evaluation and how you can have specificity. It's like outside the light rail station or outside of Sodo, and then if you start to count up, do all of those work. I guess what I'm trying to say is I see how then you have a good crosshairs between visitor and visitor and resident, sorry, and resident. And that starts to kind of, I think, attenuate some of that dichotomy between the two. And so, yeah, I don't have a total clear picture on it because of that. It's like, you can see it in one vein and then the other feels like a implication or imposition.
Do you have something else?
Yeah, well, I was just kind of wondering, Adam, is it because it's digital that you object to it, or is it because it's advertising? And
totally
add a comment onto this.
Thank you for asking.
You can't participate in activity in the public right away without seeing advertising. I mean, good luck. So,
well, I think that,
and including digital advertising, by the way, which
I think that's part of the discussion here. And I think that's an important discussion is I can choose to go on Facebook, and I know that ads are part of that, or YouTube or whatever, right? That's the deal that I'm making is I choose to go there and it's paid for by ad revenue and I get the deal and I choose to do it or not do it. I don't often is the truth. The right of way, I'm going to work. I'm going to pick up my kids. I'm going to whatever. You don't get to choose to be out in public. You have to do there for your day-to-day life. And right now, the sign code is limiting, maybe not effectively in 100% of the time, but it's limiting the amount of advertising that the public consumes in the right of way, especially off-site advertising, which is what we're talking about here is off-site, not on-site, what you can do on your property, but what you can do in a public right of way. And so I think that's a major change in city policy to say, now we are selling public right of way for advertising. And it's a thing I think a lot of people need to weigh in on. And I don't think 150 people weighing in on it answers that question.
But when you're in the public right of way and you're going to work, riding light rail or the bus, you're on public right of way, on public transportation, there's advertising in the bus, on the light rail, in the light rail, in addition to, which is all in the right of way, which is all publicly funded. In addition to all of the signage that you just see just by this existing in the city, So I don't think, for me, the argument that like, I don't want, I mean, it's another advertisement for sure. But, you know, again, when I see it in the context of the city with all the other stuff in the city, I think this would be a lot more, I mean, I could see it being a lot more bothered by it if it were like a really, you know, small town or something like that. It would stand out like a sore thumb. In an urban environment like Seattle, I find them very inobtrusive. So you could still argue, is there enough public benefit are we getting enough out of it, I guess, right?
Right.
And I think, you know, I remember who said this, the city of Seattle, jeez, I can't remember,
Mayor's office?
yeah, the mayor's office. I don't think it's the mayor's office, the RC memo. But they do talk about like what they're gonna do on each location. I think Michael, and we've had the discussion about, you know, if there's a dead street tree on that street, improve the street tree. If they're talking about removing broken items and kind of improving the immediate surroundings. I think that we could ask for you know, if there's a curb cut that's been abandoned. So there's some other things in the public benefit. In terms of like not seeing, you know, your right to not see advertising while you're in the public right of way, I guess I don't buy that.
So I would like to bring some other, great comments. No, great. This is exactly what we should be doing. I know Brian had his hand up. I think Susan, did you have your hand up? I just had one thing I want to say before, just since Adam opened the door, I'm going to walk through it. I will just state for the record that as somebody who's worked in policy for decades and a number of code amendments in a number of cities, a term permit is a great tool for some things. It's a bad tool for making big policy changes. I wish we weren't doing it this way. But we are. So that's what we've been handed. I agree with Adam. It's just not the right tool for a broader policy discussion like this about off-premises advertising in the right of way. Since we are looking at a term permit, even though it's an unusual one, I just wanted to quickly say that the criteria that I've been like really focused on are effect on pedestrian activity, accessibility for elderly and handicapped. That's why I brought up the location guidelines. It's, you know, I just, having worked on the PED master plan, having worked a lot with the PED advisory board back in the day, our sidewalks are not infinite resources. And we have to first and foremost preserve mobility and accessibility. So I know the design team concurs with that. I presume the DSA does too. But I think that's why those location and criteria really matter. And it's difficult for me to assess some of these criteria without knowing what all of those are going to be. It's just hard, you know, so, but I think they're really important. So, Brian, I think you were next, then we'll go to Susan.
I think I just to the discussion. I think we said a few things about this being a way to solve signage issues, a way to solve or aid in calling 911. There are sort of stated benefits of having these units. I find it curious that we have solved, or at least attempted to solve, those same issues in different ways in different parts of the city. One of our most highly trafficked tourist areas is the waterfront, and we are excluding these from that area. To me, that's an interesting caveat on why would we solve the same issues that we're having one way in one area of our city and not the other. I see the opposite answer to that of like around the stadiums. I see this as a very useful thing around the stadiums in very specific highly trafficked zones. But I then wonder why it doesn't apply to the other highly trafficked zone. And so I'm with you. I think it's an interesting, why are we solving this one way in one condition? And it's not a policy statement.
Can I jump in on
Please.
that? Because this is actually a question that maybe has been answered already. To that question of why are these not being proposed in highly touristic areas like neighborhood commercial districts or the waterfront, is that because of sign code excluding those regions?
My understanding, and I think it might be helpful to hear from the team that or Mark can represent this. If it, as a practical matter, if it goes in the shoreline, it would require a shoreline permit for each and every one, which is a challenge.
Right.
I think that there's also concern, and I know this to be true from the Office of the Waterfront, by adding those into the vision and what they've created. There was some concern about that, and Emily Burns, I think, and Rory, if you want to hear more from them from the Office of the Waterfront, do that. I think that's part of it, but I also think that, and I don't, Mark, jump in if you have anything else about some of the limitations. I do know for a fact that the shoreline permit piece wasn't issued.
Well, you've got it right.
It should be.
And it's a timeline issue.
Yes.
It's very attractive to be down.
Yeah.
We've had historic districts say, why not us? They have process in that additional, so it could happen.
And
in
the
future.
process is the sign code.
Well, no, it's their process for landmarked districts. They have their process individually and we have citywide. That takes time. We don't have that much time right now. So we've edited down the program to fit where we can, we know that we can do these, get them in eventually before FIFA 2026.
And I think that kind of gets to, Brian, to your question. I mean, I think for good or for ill, different parts of the city have different regulatory layers.
I'll just say, and I won't speak for Emily and Rory, we did meet with them. There is a lot going on now, new and great, things that we're going to appreciate, both interpretive and wayfinding. So it's not the right time to compete with that, I think. But Emily, you go ahead.
And I apologize. Could you just let me know the topic?
It's just, why not the waterfront?
Why
right
not the
now?
waterfront?
Why not the waterfront right now?
So the waterfront urban design has been ongoing for well over a decade and did not envision the digital kiosks in these particular locations. We have a number of very fine finishes that are actually going to be challenging to restore. And this is just one of those examples. It is very well planned and thought out as to where things are in those locations, whether they're refuge or signage. And Rory and I work very closely together on the interpretive signage elements that are not digital. We did propose 3 potential locations that are outside of the shoreline permitted area. And I think that is another critical feature here, is that it's very challenging to get permits adjacent to the shoreline. I have a wonderful slide that I could show, when we do our presentations, of how many entities are involved with anything that is adjacent to the shoreline. So it is incredibly challenging.
Just to add, we and the folks that operate attractions, businesses, and the park on the waterfront see incredible value from these, even if they're not located in the waterfront zone, to help people find the Overlook Walk, the East-West connections, and understand all the events and programming that Friends of Waterfront Seattle will be doing on the waterfront. And so I think that, to me, is the key question of, can these still serve the waterfront and helping people discover and find and participate in what's happening there, a whole new part of our city that didn't exist like it does today and will in February when it's all done. And the folks down there that represent those entities and attractions uniformly say yes.
So to kind of call it, we're veering a little bit away from this. These are all pertinent points, but I want to make sure we get to any other points that people want to make relating to the criteria. Zoom in, I think you had a comment, and then Brian, we'll go back to you. And Kate, I wanted to see if you have any other thoughts you would have.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just wanted to ask the other commissioners. I mean, after the information we saw today, I personally don't have any further reservations about the physicality of this thing on the street. Site workshop studies, I think, show that it can fit in, at least in these downtown neighborhoods, I think, appreciate Marnie's analysis. If Marnie says it's not a safety concern, I totally believe it. So I guess where I am is like, if these were not ad supported, I would have no problem with them, I guess. So just as a thought experiment, if the city was funding these on their own and the agency came to us and said, we want to do this program, I think all the physical and sort of aesthetic concerns about the object itself and also the functioning of the device, I think, the functioning is very thoughtful, apart from the fact that it's ad supported. I would have no problem. So I guess I'm curious, one question to other commissioners is like, do you have any remaining physical kind of concerns? And then two, do we need to talk more about this question of is the public benefit worth it for, the potential negative impacts on the public realm due to advertising? And I guess I would disagree with your point a little bit, Ben. I think we do have an urban environment that is actually quite free of advertising. It's almost non-existent except on transit buses, which are not static and do not exist in one place. Our sign code is very restrictive. So I think the context matters, right? Like in another city, it might be, it's just part of the background, but I think in Seattle, we actually don't really have it. And so it does feel like a major shift. So I guess kind of those two questions, do we have any physical concerns and any further thoughts on, on the benefits versus cost?
Just because it's my job, I also want to say we're at noon.
Yeah.
So bearing that in mind.
Well, I appreciate the thought of, or the way you stated it is way better. So I don't have any physical concerns either. So I think it is all comes down to advertising. But if you ride public transportation regularly, I think, with the bus tunnels, it's all, you come out of Benaroya Hall, they had a whole Samsung Galaxy ad plastered there, static public area, so I will disagree again that it's not that we are free of advertising in the public area. And I think there are parts of the city for sure that are free of it. So, I think what we're trying to get to, this is what you're trying to do is like remove a topic of concern. Like, I agree. I don't have a physical.
I do have physical concerns with it. That go back to safety, actually. It's an 8-foot tall by 3 feet wide object, which is larger than a human. So it's easy to obscure bodies that want to be obscured. That's one thing that gives me great concern. There are plenty of driver distraction studies done on transitioning image slides that are also relative to this. SODO, many people, there's traffic studies that are done that are over, 25 miles per hour. So, but for me, it's more about the physical pedestrian experience of an object that would exceed the sign codes. It's almost 4 times bigger than what is allowed currently. So if we have a rollout of 80 very large objects that, again, this is something that I mentioned earlier, that signifies a very particular design language from this moment in time, a cell phone that we all currently have in our pockets, including people that are coming to visit the World Cup. It's already a redundant object, and it's magnified significantly larger than my body. So why do I have to interact with that physical form over and over and over and over again if the average of engagement is 10 times a day when we have 90,000 workers in downtown Seattle a day? So just the physical relationship of that beyond safety, but also redundancy is something that I.
So let's stay on this question.
Yeah.
Because of just to keep us focused. So because it does pertain to these criteria.
Totally.
So concerns about the physicality of these, I'm hearing that no, yes. And
yeah, I think that's a great question, and thank you, Zubin, for raising it. Again, I think that often when we're permitting infrastructure has a life cycle of 50 or 100 years. When we design bridges, we expect them to last 100 years. Technology, this phone is, 2 years old, and people make fun of me for it, right? Like, I think it's fine. But to assume that this thing, which now seems very futuristic and cool and shiny and useful, is going to be useful in 15 years or seem any of those things in 15 years, I just think is like naive. And so I think that's part of the reason why we permit these things differently and evaluate them differently. And so, do I think it's a nice object now? I do. Well, I think it's a nice object in 30 years. I can't imagine something from 30 years ago seeming relevant and useful and cool in the right of way. It's there now. So
Retro at that point.
It'll be a landmark.
Okay, so I want to try to get to everybody. Who's next? Who wants to speak next to this question? Right.
To me, it's more this form versus a reasonable alternate form. And I think this is trying to solve a lot of different things, but not necessarily doing it well in any one of those cases. So I couldn't agree more with, I think it was Alex Hudson that said, our transit is not well signed. We'd love people to be able to get to our transit systems. Going to this thing that's mid-block that has nothing to do with our transit nodes is, to me, not a way to solve that. Like, we should solve the transit lack of signage in another way. Agreed that this takes maybe a baby step towards that. But are we going to say that is solved and forget about trying to improve the signage of transit? I'm not sold that this is the solution for any one of those things in any meaningful way. And I think that's the challenge for me.
Concerns about these structures. Does somebody else want to speak to this?
I just wanted to reiterate something that you were asking about in terms of potential, if this were to be rolled out, what if, like, physical mitigation work could be done in the streetscape as an amenity. Right now, all of the public benefit is wrapped up in content and not in physical form. And to me, there's a real imbalance there. I just wanted to underscore some of your questioning about that.
And related to that, and this also relates to Adam, what you were describing, the way that who this is for. So this is something that tourists would engage with. Is it something that is benefiting someone who sees it every day? And so I know that I mentioned the question about whether these could be, for art events, could these be fully taken over by an art event when it's occurring? A piece like that could make it compelling to me as something that artists in our city would use, or something that when we're trying to do major programmatic events in our streetscapes, as part of, if we're saying that this is part of the Mayor's Downtown Activation Plan, really understanding, can this be a component to help transform for an event? I think that could start to answer how is this benefiting those of us who see it every day? If it actually becomes something that there's a gallery in the streetscape, right? That could be interesting to me in terms of that being a benefit to those of us who are there every day. Whereas if it is just for tourists, it's hard to see it as a benefit to those who see it as often. Though I do see some of those benefits. We do benefit by having tourists within our downtown. But if they could be a real part of activation that feels like Seattle, it might be a better trade-off to have those other times when it is the proliferation of advertising the right of way in a way that we haven't seen in Seattle.
So Zubin, I'll weigh in on your question because it's a great one. And I think it's really like, it kind of depends. I mean, it's just, so I think going back to, I think Adam's really good point. I'm thinking about like sort of council intent. Why do we prohibit off premises signs? I think we do it for several reasons, to not have clutter in the right of way. Because, we've all seen sandwich board signs, littered out on sidewalks and they block sidewalks. So this is going to be more controlled than that. But it is sort of, it's hard to kind of separate the content from the structure, even though I'm trying to do that because I think it's the right it's the right thing to do. I haven't been given any information in any of these presentations that leads me to believe these are de facto inconsistent with these criteria. But I also think context matters. I think that this thing in front at First and Royal Brome, I don't have a problem with it. At Third and Madison, where there's a busy bus stop, might be really problematic. I mean, we have a lot of street furniture out there. So I think the problem I'm having, and I sense a lot of us are having, is we're used to looking at a term permit as a structure in a place that we can evaluate. And which we're not being asked, we can't do that here. And I don't think any of us, if what Kate said, want to review 80 specific signs. I probably don't really want to do that. But that's generally what we do when we look at a term permit. I mean, that's, sorry. And so that's, so the answer to your question, honestly, is I don't know. And that's what I'm struggling with, honestly. You know. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, we're not really evaluating whether, well, I don't know, maybe we are, Michael. Are we evaluating whether the term permit is the right tool? I mean, that is the tool that.
That's the tool.
It's the only tool really.
That's the tool we've been given.
I mean, you could also go back to the city and say, like, we need better tools to make exceptions, because anything also, you know, I was kind of wondering, like, when was the sign code last adopted? Like, when was it last reviewed or revised? Because technology evolves, signage of everything, you know, we're evolving. And to your point, Adam, you know, is this thing going to be cool in 30 years? I am assuming, and maybe this is the wrong assumption, that as technology evolves, they are going to evolve with it. So we don't have a 30-year-old, you know, digital screen sitting out there in 30 years. You know, there's AI, there's all kinds of things that I'm assuming will evolve with this. And so that could raise another question of, like, is that helpful or good or scary or whatever? But I just feel like this is like such a small, kind of to like the obstructions, and we're getting all wrapped up about like locations and everything. You know, like Phoebe brought up, I was wondering how many blocks are downtown, and there's, I think, 300 blocks ish downtown or something like that.
And then there's 300, 1,200 block faces.
You know, so 400 block faces. This is like 2 to 5% of block like streets would have this. So like as you're walking around downtown, it's not like you're constantly bombarded with this. I mean, downtown is, I actually think we have a small downtown area because you can walk across it, but it's not like they're constantly in your face everywhere that you go or around every corner. There's, you know, if you, I actually think a map would have helped. Probably a number of maps. I'm sorry, I asked a question. I didn't let you answer.
And maybe what you consider when you look at your report or add to the report you will eventually do is maybe that's what you say is context does matter. And so in the initial pilot of 30, maybe the recommendation is let's just keep them in let's just keep them in very specific public places that are about our visitor base and not our resident. And that could be something that you may want to recommend to the council to say, know that there's an initial rollout of 30. It's highly likely that at that 30, there will be some kind of a blue sky. That's a recommendation that's in the report. Like, what are we getting? And is that a right thing? And how are they being maintained and all that? Maybe as part of that recommendation, you recommend to the council that let's focus in on places that feel a little more compatible before we get to denser urban environments where context does matter in a way that affects the residential community, maybe more than the business. If that's just something for you to think about, you don't need to react today. That might be a way to answer the question that you keep tackling.
That's a great point. And just to touch on something that you were initially discussing then with the assumption that the physical form that this digital advertising is taking would likely evolve over 30 years. That is a fair assumption to make. No company wants to be using hardware that dates them immediately to 2024 when it's 2034. However, a 30-year, 15 renewable term permit for a total of 30 years then grants a monopoly. If we're in the discussion of selling our eyeballs, it grants a monopoly then to just one organization, one business to define what that form is, which is a huge advantage that, of course, has been discussed a lot in the emergence of media and technology communication. So it's just something to think about as we're discussing this, and to note that the precedent that we have with built-in digital physical objects with, for example, the Office of Arts and Culture, digital art only gets a 10-year contract because of that very concern. So I just wanted to raise that.
Yeah, and I think, Kate, to your point too, it's sort of related that I'm moving a little bit beyond just the term permit criteria at this point. I think we should have a little bit of time to talk about that. I think one thing that has come up in public testimony, and I think has come up in some of our questions leading up to this deliberation, is if this permit is permitted, and then these go out there, it does sort of de facto change city policy to the point that other applicants could come in and ask for the same thing. Now, I don't want to hold this. It's not really fair to put that all on this applicant. But it does potentially set a precedent, to use the word precedent, to open the door to other ones of these coming in that could then add additional clutter to the right of way. Now, again, I don't want to put that on this applicant and this proposal, but I think it is, just to be honest, that is something that's been in the back of my mind a little bit as a model.
Yeah, so just to add on to that, I think that's a fundamental part of what's before us and why it takes the level of consideration that we've all put forward, is because DSA has been in a very specific position in being able to provide a certain type of public benefit in our downtown. I mean, the level of stewardship to our downtown from DSA is a huge part of what helps make our downtown function as it does. And we all know the value of each of the ambassadors. And so I guess my question for us all to think about is, as others may come forward and want to propose things, is what DSA is putting forward kind of clear and trackable enough? So these commitments to number of ambassadors, to some of the services that really, with $1.1 million, I feel that DSA can provide more to our downtown with $1.1 million than many others in our downtown could, because of the existing services that they provide. And if something like this moved forward, I would want to see the same level of public benefit required if anyone else had something similar approved. And so I worry about the $1.1 million to an organization versus really putting something in the sand of this level of service to our downtown, this amount of stewardship of our downtown that DSA is uniquely situated to provide. I just want to ensure that we're not then opening the door to others who may not then be able to provide the same level of benefits, but the thing that was listed made it seem that they should be able to, also acknowledging the monopoly concern for an organization like IEC.
That's why in the recommendation in the draft that you've all seen is just that council, you really need to do some, not blue sky just for them, but put some serious bounds around when the 80 are done, if someone else wants to come forward and use this as a template, that let's talk about that before you even allow a permit application, because there needs to be more transparency and deliberative thought by the council if they want any more of these to occur, to build on or potentially detract from the success that the DSA might be able to bring.
Yeah, and I'll just, Molly's point, I'll just want to say it matters to me that DSA is the applicant here, because I know that John and DSA staff and board have the best interests of downtown at heart. They have a lot of credibility, I think, with probably everybody here. Will that be true of the potential next applicant, or now that we not open the floodgates, it's not a flood, maybe it's a drink off, I don't know what it is. But is that, I do think we have to think about that, and I think council has to think about it, and that gets to the what we want to say to them as part of our recommendation.
But I guess I maybe don't quite understand that in that. So this has been a pretty intensive process for us, the city, the mayor, DSA. I'm sure Ike is like, oh my. So this is a very intensive process. So we, the city council, the design review commission could not recommend it. City council could not approve it. And any subsequent application that came in, they would still have to go through
Without
the
the same
same
process.
process.
Yeah, right.
And if somebody did go through the same process and did meet all the criteria and it was agreed to, then it would be approved. So whatever else the next thing is, right? So I don't know that this, I don't think this necessarily sets a precedent for like easy, like, oh, we're gonna have 10 kiosks on every street frontage for.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting it would be
Yeah,
easy, but it does.
Right.
It opens.
Yeah, there's a.
But you're right, everybody would have to go through the same.
There's a pathway to getting something approved that could be a benefit to the city. If we decide it's a benefit to the city, I don't see any problem with allowing other benefits to the city to go through that same process. And if they meet the approval, then they do.
Fair enough.
And I just think that we need to be very clear in tracking why that is different, why that is special, because I don't believe that 10 ambassadors put on the street by anyone is the same as 10 ambassadors put on the street by an organization that already provides the infrastructure to communicate with them, for them to respond to things. I think the specificity of that is important because commissioners in 20 years may not know why we believed that this was any different than any other proposal. And I just want us to make sure that we're tracking that very clearly.
That's great.
12:15. Sorry. That's just my job.
Yeah, so it's 12:15. We are going to be deliberating more in 2 weeks. Some of us won't be here for that meeting because I'm going to be in Portugal. I'm not going to join this, sorry. What do we want to do with the rest of our, what do we want to do with the, not going to happen. What do we want to do with the rest of our time that we have today? Continue the discussion?
Well, I'd like to move to take an up or down vote on the kind of merits of the program as we currently understand it through the lens of the term permits that we've been asked to evaluate it, as well as the signage code, the SDC lenses, the public benefits provided as we understand them, and the public outreach and engagement debate.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Kate.
I have a quick question on that. Is that what you're just saying? Is that the action sheet that we're reviewing it on? I mean, that is the term permit.
Yes.
Is that, we're kind of like, those are the criteria that we're up or down voting on?
Using the term permit criteria as well as,
Just to be, so I think the motion is we're being asked to state whether we support or oppose the program as it's been presented. Using the term permit criteria and any other, I think Adam opened the door to any other things as design commissioners we feel would be appropriate in this.
Okay.
I have a question about that. Are we able to vote individually on this topic, or are we exclusively voting yes or no on the program?
I think you should, whether say yes or no, and then tie your vote, your yes or no, to that criteria.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we have a vote. Any other discussion on the motion before we call the question? Hearing none, then who gets to be the lucky first person to vote? Brian or Ben?
Well, we started this way.
We started
to begin
this way.
with, so Brian.
Are you ready to go?
I think I'm quite torn on this. But I still pretty firmly believe that there are reasonable alternatives that don't tie themselves to advertising. So I vote no.
I much deliberation and discussion and rigorous research in considering these term permits. I also vote no in consideration that they do not. I'm not convinced of the public benefit mitigation. I'm concerned about traffic and pedestrian safety. I'm concerned about the effect on pedestrian activity. I'm concerned about the interruption of the existing streetscape. and the view blockage. So.
Yeah.
John, I wanted to say, I read all of your emails. That's not true of anyone else. That's not true of my boss. It's not true of my partner. And so I can't think of a nicer thing to say to anyone. I respect the DSA immensely and the work that you do. And I really thank Ike for the really diligent, thoughtful time and effort. I know how hard these are to put together. So thank you, Mark. I've been through the process. This is really tough to do. And so I really appreciate and respect everyone that's been here. I think at the end of the day, these are very, very nice digital billboards with a user interface. And they're questionably useful, that user interface to residents. And I think that's where I'm evaluating this from. The mayor's office sent us a statement that calls the downtown action plan calls for a bold, innovative thinking that matches the innovative spirit of Seattle. I can't come around to seeing selling digital advertising as bold or innovative or matching the spirit of Seattle. And so when I look at it through the term permit lenses, especially around enjoyment of neighboring land uses, public benefit mitigation, I don't see it meeting those. And I think the letter that we're preparing will go into more detail. I'd be happy to, but I don't think we have time. I'm really concerned that it doesn't appear on the face of it. The lawyers will tell us, but it doesn't appear on the face of it to me. The sign codes to me, and I haven't seen an explanation of how it does. And so that to me is a blinking red light for the current point in the process and how much deliberation we've had. When I look at the SDC lenses and our mission, we talk about inspired design that unifies the public realm and inspires the community by embodying state-of-the-art practices. And I don't see this being inspired design or inspiring the community. Responds to its context. Since we don't yet know where these are, it's hard to know how they will respond to their context, but I will say national advertising, it's hard to imagine it responding to its context. Innovative sustainability. Having a public realm free of ads is a big part of what people talk about in sustainability, and so I don't think it meets that criteria. Social inclusion, about responding fluently to its cultural context, same comment. I just can't see national advertising embodying social inclusion. And so it doesn't, in my opinion, meet the core lenses of the SDC. I don't believe there's been public outreach and engagement sufficient to justify a proposal of this scale. And as I said, I think the public benefits as I see them are questionable. And I think you could see both sides of that. And so there's privacy concerns about a Wi-Fi enabled device with cameras and microphones connecting to networks that I don't think respectfully I can fully control. I think there's unknown unknowns with old technology about placing these in neighborhoods beyond the downtown kind of tourist centers. And I think the winners and losers in this are clear, and I just don't see the public being the winner of this. And so very begrudgingly and reluctantly, I unfortunately am voting no on this proposal.
Thank you.
I'd just like to echo everything Adam said about respect for the DSA and for the work the application team has done. I think it's actually quite moving to me that we're able as a city to have such an elevated level of discussion about things like this. And so I just really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of that and have you all engage with us so robustly. As I kind of already said, if advertising were not involved in this proposal, I think wholeheartedly support it, but it is, and that's the way it's paid for. So, ultimately, I also, do not recommend approval of this proposal. And it's just for the simple reason that, I think the item 10 in the sign code asks us to evaluate the public benefit mitigation elements, as part of the proposal. I do think the imposition of advertising in public voice fairly severely degrades the public realm, particularly in our context in Seattle where we don't have much of it. I don't feel like the benefits provided outweigh that. I think it's quite severe impact. But in another context, and maybe some of these contexts would be okay, but I don't feel comfortable supporting the proposal as a whole term permit. I think individual locations might be okay. And I really look forward to working with the rest of the commission to draft our recommendations memo that goes to council to kind of outline some of those further criteria that we support.
Caitlin, welcome to the commission. It's your first meeting, kind of hard to put you in this. What would you like to do here?
Hi, everyone. So this is my first commission meeting, and I spent the week trying to catch up on some of the past meetings of these and listening to the conversations today and the presentation. I would like to make a vote. So hearing the whole project, I feel like it really centers businesses and tourists. And as a Seattle resident, I wish it was more resident focused. And I see a lot of negative impact on the existing streetscapes, pedestrian activity, and enjoyment of the neighborhood land use. Therefore, I will not be supporting this.
Thank you. Molly?
So for me, I think I'm torn on it in many ways. And I think the biggest challenge for me is in regard to community input. And so really want to see greater community input. But in saying that, that's part of what I'm torn about, because one opportunity for community input would be to have a very rigorous process after having a certain number of these and actually hearing from our community in a way that we would be willing to stop at that point. So if that is 30, if it is a very rigorous process at that point to demonstrate that these were valuable to Seattle residents. And we care that it's valuable to tourists as well. We care that we have tourists in our downtown. They're part of what activates our downtown. And so residents, businesses, local businesses, businesses that have those directly in front of their businesses, really understanding how our city has responded to having these, I think could be very valuable. I do think that we have a lot of challenges in our downtown at this moment in time. And it is an imperative for us to be creative. And so I do appreciate hearing from the Chief Innovation Officer. I do appreciate the desire by the mayor and city council to try a wide variety of things. I worry about the long-term implications of these specifically. I worry about the ways that they contradicts our code, our signage code in particular. But I do wonder if having a test case of this is part of the creative process of trying to improve a downtown. And so because of that, I feel quite torn. And I do believe that community input is absolutely required if we were to move forward with this. And so I really want to, for the mayor and for city council, if they were to move this forward, I would want to see us be very rigorous about the vast creativity of how we could use these. So I would want to see some of these events where we're exclusively using it for art, where we're shutting down a street and using them as part of a backdrop to something bigger than the kiosks themselves. And so what that means in terms of a vote
Yeah, that's right.
is a real challenge. So I will say I am willing to vote yes with the condition that after 30 kiosks, it is as rigorous of a process and much more rigorous than this in terms of input from businesses, input from the community, input from those who are making use of these. And Ike needs to be willing for that to be the end if this has not given us more than just street furniture.
I'm gonna get to go last.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for your comments. And thank you. I will basically echo everything that's been said. I think it's been really an incredible process and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody's commentary. I sort of was gauging where we would be going and where the turning point of, and I think I'm aligned with Molly on that, in that I'm completely torn. But I keep on saying to myself, if I were to say no, I feel that it almost feels, it feels like remiss and not giving a fair shot to test something out. And if I say just an overarching yes, it wouldn't be that either. So I am going to vote yes. And that is all based on the, I don't know if we can have that full condition, but, or you can certainly propose it, and that's what I was getting at too with the 30 exactly, as being able to really understand what the user data, not just user data, but, you know, the holistic data that we kind of understand from our city and how we're benefiting from it. Because I think we all are here saying where we actually benefiting as a city. However, I do think downtown really could benefit from this. And I think we kind of owe it to that to try to test it out. So that's where I'll fall today.
And I will say the reason that I say condition is because it would be a no otherwise.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
I would
No, that's fair.
otherwise
Yeah,
abstain.
that's fair.
If
Yeah.
not like that.
Feels like we might have sat this way intentionally or something. I don't know. I probably, I'm going to go through I'm kind of looking at the criteria that was, you know, the action items and just, you know, view blockage and impacts, reduction in natural light. I think you guys did a great job of showing the visualization, interruption or interference with the existing streetscape or other street amenities. It is very location dependent, but I trust SDOT and DSA and Ike to be thoughtful and locate those effectively. Effect on pedestrian activity, I don't think it's a negative or a positive. Effect on commerce and enjoyment of neighboring land uses. Actually, I do feel like our city is a destination and that we do want to welcome and encourage visitors and tourists to our city. It's a really critical part of our city reputation stuff. So I think these could really be a benefit to people. I know when I visit cities, everyone says that you have a cell phone in your pocket, but you don't know what to look up. So you're trying to find, I think they could be really valuable for that. I won't go into that. Effect on traffic and pedestrian safety. I get reports from Heffron all the time, and so I'm going to defer to her. Accessibility of the elderly and handicapped. I mean, these are clearly as accessible as any of our streets. Are the public benefit mitigation elements? I think some of the things that we're going to recommend in our report do a lot to solve that for me. Street trees, curb cuts, all, you know, cleaning up the street, do a lot for that. In terms of the actual monetary dollar, I would, you know, one of my questions I forgot to ask was if DSA was going to invest that money into those, you know, I can't remember what it was, the street cleaner and the mid, because in the presentation it said that you could invest it. So I don't know if we will do it or we could do it. So I had a little question on that. But anyway, to me, the presentation addresses those, and so Adam, I wish we had a lot more time because you brought up a lot of comments that I would like to have a lot deeper discussion on. So I really appreciate that. But anyway, I'm gonna vote yes, and I also support. I really like the idea of having a review and like, hey, did these actually work the way that we wanted them to work, and maybe a checkpoint on that. So I appreciate that also, but I don't know that that's within the, I don't know if that's what they're asking for. So I don't know if I would stop it at that point. So I don't know how that works, but I will vote yes.
So I would love to see more robust discussion between Adam and Ben. The good news is we'll have more time to discuss this on October 3rd. So I've been really struggling with. I have very significant, as I've stated before, procedural concerns about why are we doing this way. I think we should have done this as a broader code amendment. I just really feel strongly about that. I'm trying to set that aside and focus on the substantive question at hand, but I just wanted to state that for the record. So I think I'm also very, very torn, and I was very, very torn. Like riding the bus in this morning, I'm like, how the hell am I going to vote on this thing? The discussion has been really helpful and beneficial. It really matters to me that DSA is the applicant here. It matters to me that the BIAs support this. It matters to me that organizations like Transportation Choices Coalition and Commute Seattle that we've heard that have a mission that I very strongly support also have expressed support for this. That said, I think the public comments against this have been compelling. So I think I really value the public comment. It hasn't helped me because it's like, oh, that's a good point, but that's also a good point, you know. So I think Mark and the design team have done, and I'll echo what my other the fellow commissioners have said, a really good job of responding to our concerns, which have been real. And so what I'm faced with is seeing a term permit that right now doesn't appear to violate, in my mind, I'm kind of with Ben, doesn't appear to violate any of the criteria we've been given. I would like to see, frankly, a pilot, to Molly's point, I'd love to see a pilot after 5 or 10 of these. I mean, I don't want to have a pilot after 30. I want to have a pilot and that's not unusual. I mean, back in the day, we used to pilot things like park lights or streeteries. Let's put a few of them out there, see in certain locations, see how they work. So that's just that's not the proposal in front of us, but truthfully, that's what I'd like to see. So I'm a very tepid yes, but. There's no such thing as a yes, but in this case, that's kind of because I think it's all about the guardrails and the conditions that ultimately, if council chooses to approve this, that are put around this thing. And I agree. I think that public benefit mitigation should be more robust. I would like to see more evaluation. And I think it'll perhaps be an interesting conversation in 2 weeks around what the final report says. So, but I really respect everybody's vote, because I'm like, this wasn't easy. And I'll say in the past, I voted against term permits that everybody else voted for, because it just, I respect the differences of opinion on things like this. And this is raising big policy questions that we usually don't get into, but we've been kind of forced to at this point. So really appreciate the work and the discussion. So anything else, Michael, that we need to do at this point?
No, on October 3rd, you'll do a page turner with the report. I have some notes that I may make another amendment to that. We'll send that out to you as soon as possible. We'll also send a copy to the DSA team. And then we'll see you on October 3rd.
Thank you.
Thank you
for all of that. This is not easy.
No.
Really appreciate the deliberation. Thank you.
And I think if hearing nothing else, I think the full commission is done. 1:30 is the subcommittee for LA Big Comment. And that's going to be here in person. And I think we're done.
Is October 3rd on our calendar?
It should have been Julie. Thank you.
I haven't.
Advisory.
Commission it.
We're not.
Where would you feel
Doesn't matter.
Good job.
Yeah, great job. Nice job for the cats. I think you did a really.
I think it was a great. I wish we could have had more time.
I agree. I think there's a lot of stuff.
But I think there's.
The answer. Is it cool? Sure.
Bring to the table.
It's a good speculative
It
question.
was weird.
I know.
Me too, and I literally.
I don't think it's what we would come up with.
I knew that.
I don't know. We would not.